Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting of the Oradell Mayor and Council for Tuesday, March 10th, 2026 to order. The time is 7:34 p.m. Notice of this meeting was published in the official newspapers and prominently posted in Borough Hall and filed with the municipal clerk in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Council President Kelly, would you lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please, Laura?
Mayor Koth,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Tashian,
Here.
Mr. Kern is not here yet. Mr. Gullo,
Here.
Ms. Harrer,
Here.
Mr. Banfield.
Here.
Excuse me, I'm going to make a request. This is very echoey, and although we have microphones, I would be so grateful if you could all speak up a tad. Thank you.
You have a volume dial on your microphone you can
There's volume
adjust.
too, so all of those are possible.
Okay, for next on the agenda, we're going to issue a proclamation and a citation to two of our officers. I'm going to ask Police Commissioner Gullo and Chief Gangemi to join me at the podium up front.
This is from our PR guy.
I mean,
Who is Raleigh?
they're up there now.
Just like this. Okay, first I'm going to introduce Chief Gangemi to talk a little bit about what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mayor. This stems back from an incident that occurred in the borough of New Milford on March 17th, 2025. Officers were on patrol and they heard the call for help and assistance for a stabbing that occurred at their New Milford High School. Officers Pressburger and Astuni responded promptly to the high school, and without incident, they jumped right into the mix, helping with the investigation, gathering up witnesses, and keeping everybody at the scene. Later on, Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, the Milford Police, with the efforts of these two officers in the beginning of the incident, because we got there so promptly and quickly, they were able to arrest the actors that had fled the scene. So in their honor, Chief Clancy has issued them 2 awards. Do you want to do your proclamation first?
No.
And I'll just read one of them. They're both the exact same. It says, at the time it was Sergeant Pressburger and Officer Nick Astuni has distinguished himself by the performance of an act of a highly commendable nature, for which this certificate is duly authorized and issued. In grateful recognition of your assistance during the stabbing investigation and arrest on March 17, 2025, in keeping with the highest traditions of the police profession. Signed by Chief Brian Clancy of the New Milford Police Department.
Thank you, Chief. And fittingly, the council and I wanted to offer a proclamation recognizing both officers. I'm going to read it once because it's the same for both of them. Whereas on March 17, 2025, a serious and violent stabbing occurred at New Milford High School requiring an immediate and coordinated law enforcement response, and whereas Lieutenant Roger Pressburger and Sergeant Nicholas Astuni, the Oradell Police Department, responded promptly and professionally to the scene, demonstrating exceptional composure, initiative, and dedication to public safety. And whereas through their decisive actions and investigative awareness, Lieutenant Pressburger and Sergeant Astuni obtained critical and time-sensitive information at the scene that proved essential in identifying the actors involved in the incident. And whereas the information gathered by these officers directly assisted responding officers and detectives in rapidly determining the identities of the suspects, ultimately leading to their successful apprehension and arrest. And whereas their conduct exemplifies the highest standards of law enforcement professionalism and reflects great credit upon themselves, the Oradell Police Department, and the Borough of Oradell. And whereas it is fitting and proper that the borough formally recognize their acts of service that significantly contributed to the safety and well-being of the community. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Oradell do hereby commend and recognize Lieutenant Roger Pressburger and Sergeant Nicholas Astuni for their distinguished actions, professionalism, and vital contributions during the response to the New Milford High School stabbing incident. Be it further proclaimed that the borough expresses its sincere appreciation for their commitment to duty and for the crucial role their actions played in bringing those responsible to justice. In witness whereof, Mayor and Council of the Borough of Oradell have caused this proclamation to be issued on this day, the 10th of March, 2026, signed by myself as the mayor. Roger, Nick, you want to come up? Maybe Joe, can you take a picture with Ted's camera? Sure. You can step back if you need to. Kidding, we're very thrilled to have Lieutenant Mano as our executive officer of the police department. Okay, next item on the agenda is, do we have any items for discussion before the council? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any old business before the council this evening? Wonderful. Any new business before the council this evening?
Mayor, if I may, just a reminder, this Thursday evening is senior night at Bergen County Players. I don't think we have a set process to ensure that we have a safety officer crossing here at Park Street, say between 7:30 and 8 and 10 and 10:15, other than just reminding the police department. So I'm happy to do that. But I think in the future it does make sense to maybe just get it on that calendar so we ensure that we don't miss any of those dates. Sorry.
Pull the microphone closer.
Yeah, I was just commenting that Bergen County Players, again, the dress rehearsal of each show is usually the Thursday night prior to opening act, and they'd kindly allow our seniors, or 55 and older, I think, to attend at no charge. So, which is wonderful. We've had a great turnout for all of those shows. They're a great community partner. And again, as we all know, the Kinnicamack Road is extremely busy, so we've, in the past, ensured that we have a safety officer there at, say, 7:30 to 8:15, and then 10:15 to 10:45. So it's really that to remind our police staff and to really see if we can get a schedule in order to ensure that someone's there. As we all know, it's a busy crossing there. So that's the reason.
Thanks. Anyone else for new business? Okay, before we move on to public comment, I'm just going to take a minute to explain a few things about how the rest of the agenda will work so everybody knows when your opportunity is to be able to get up and share with the council what you would like to be heard upon with regard to affordable housing, any resolution, the ordinances that will come up. Below correspondence, you'll see the consent agenda if you have a copy of the resolution. There are 4 resolutions that we will vote on prior to going into any of the affordable housing stuff. That is going to conclude the council's what I'll define as regular business, which is anything aside from the affordable housing discussion. Once those 4 resolutions are voted upon, we will move to the first resolution under number 12, and then we will get into the second reading of each of the ordinances. As each ordinance is read, there will be time for individuals from the public to get up to the microphone, and we'll allocate whatever time is necessary so everybody can be heard to speak on each specific ordinance, right? So the big thing to realize here, and the reason I wanted to cover this, is because before I open it to public comment on non-agenda or consent agenda items, you may want to reserve your comments for a specific ordinance, or if you're just making general commentary, you can do that under the non-agenda item comment section. But anything particular to affordable housing, you'll want to do underneath the ordinances 26-1 through 26-6. Aside from those 6 ordinances, if you have other general commentary, even if it surrounds affordable housing, you should make those comments under the non-agenda item section. Because once we read each ordinance at a time, there's no opportunity after that for general public comment. So I just want everybody to understand when the opportunities to speak are, depending upon what you would like to speak about or be heard about, that you can get up to the microphone and be heard. Anybody have any questions on that before we move ahead? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm actually a little confused. I thought you just said that on each one, you would allow time for people to comment, but then you said any comments you want to have now? I'm not clear.
Any comments relating to affordable housing that do not specifically pertain to these ordinances
Okay.
should be made under the non-agenda item section of public
Thank you.
comment. Okay. I'll ask for a motion to open the floor for public comment on non-agenda items.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Floor is now open if anybody has any general comments on non-agenda items. Just make sure the mic's on, Sam.
Sam Tripsis, 327 Maple Avenue. I was wondering if you could share some information on the Blowout Mansion. I was there last night talking to the caretaker of the museum, and the place is in shambles. You know, I've never seen it so bad. Every window's boarded up, front and back. Can you tell us if there's any discussion on what's going on there?
There has been none, other than that they were an objector to our affordable housing plan. However, their objection was dismissed by the judge in his recommendation that our plan be accepted. So there's no discussion about any movement with affordable housing on that site currently. Generally speaking, we've not had any discussions as of recent with the owners of the property.
I see. I also saw a video the caretaker showed to me of kids throwing bricks through the building to the windows as an activity. It was horrendous, and he told me he submitted that to the police. So I didn't check into that, but it was disturbing to see them out in the open in the daytime doing that.
Yeah, I'll speak with the chief. I'm sure the
Yeah.
detectives are investigating it if they were provided video evidence of what happened.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Paul Latounis, 50 Beverly Road.
Paul, you're going to have to put your voice into the mic, not to the right of it. Can you lower the
this
mic?
Just, Paul, put the microphone right in front of your, there you
You're
go.
talking away.
Talk right into it.
Thank you.
Okay, better.
The closer you get, the louder it gets.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Paul Latounis, 50 Beverly Road. I'm very happy to see so many people here tonight. And I just have a few comments that I wanted to make. One is that we received in the mail, because I'm within 200 feet, a whole bunch of envelopes. And I saw that each envelope, some of them had that you had to sign in to accept it, but I never signed anything because it was just put in my mailbox. And I got them, and I looked at them, and they were like $10.41 or something a piece, or something like that. And I just looked at like so many of them, and I says, why do you have to send for each so many? You could have put them all in one envelope and saved a lot of money for the town. And I understand that many people in the area got the same thing that I got. And so I'm just, I don't know about the way we're doing things. I don't know if you had to do that legally or not, if you each one had to be separate. But I think they all could have been put in one envelope. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is the stuff that happens in writing up our planning board, when they make their decisions about what they want to do and suggest to the council and the mayor, they really aren't listening to the public when we're doing these things. And the thing is that I had been advocating for something for a long time, and it was in the master plan, and they just bypassed it and just said, instead of what was in the master plan was 15 foot between commercial and residential buildings. And they just bypassed the whole thing, and now it's 10 feet. All of a sudden, it's 10 feet. And I can't understand that, because nobody ever even spoke about it. And how could it become 10 feet? And if you go back and look at videos and things, you'll see that I had brought it up many times. And the only thing that I was told at the time is, well, if it's in the master plan, it doesn't mean anything, because it has to be an ordinance. And it should have been passed in an ordinance, and then it would be okay. So that was never done, even though I asked for it so many times. And here we are, now that all of these things are going to take place, and mostly all along Kinderkamack Road are commercial businesses. And they're bordering mostly residential families. And that's the point that I wanted to make. I wanted that buffer zone. And I know there's a lady here that is being like corralled at 445, 441. And I just, I don't know. It should have been that way. It should have been 15 feet. And that's all I wanted to say. And the things that happen, you can talk and talk about something for so many years and nothing happens. And that's the bad part about it, because the planning board knows better. These guys know better. But who knows better than the people that live here? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Paul, I'll just address the two things quickly, and I'll ask Mr. Bailey to correct me if I misspeak. I asked the same question about why we're sending 500 letters to the same house with such exorbitant postage, and even in some instances, why the return receipt card was not asked for your signature and mailed back to us. That's an issue the borough has with the postmaster as to why that wasn't done correctly. The letter carrier should have had that card signed. It was sent certified. You're supposed to sign for it. So that's an issue that the borough will discuss with the postmaster. As to why you got multiple letters, Mr. Bailey advised me when I asked him that somebody in their infinite wisdom in Trenton, who generated all the stuff we're here to talk about tonight, said that you have to be served in two different ways. A certified way, but you don't have to sign for the letter, which means technically you could claim you were not aware and you weren't served. So we also have to send one via regular mail. So it's a foolproof way that at least you received one of those letters. Now, if you were on a 200-foot list to a specific parcel, you have to be noticed about the issue relating to the parcel. If you were adjacent a zone change, separate ordinance, you have to be noticed for each and every ordinance. I don't make the rules. I think it's kind of wasteful, honestly,
Yes.
but legally we're required to notice everybody that way.
Well, I agree with you.
That's the answer I have for you on that. As far as the thing goes with the planning board, look, the timeline to accomplish all of this stuff, right, has been about 14 months. I don't know of anything that happens in 14 months in government, never mind monumental changes like we're undertaking here this evening, which is the culmination of a long process. If things are imperfect, we do have opportunities to perfect them after the fact. However, what's in the ordinances tonight is what we need to advance in order to meet the state's deadline, or we risk losing our immunity. Is that to say we might not go back into an ordinance at a later point and finagle or correct something, or we say, hey, you know what, that was a great point, you know, that might have been overlooked in the process? We absolutely have the opportunity to do that. We can't do that right now, or else we have to start the process over again, which we don't have the time for. And there's over 500 towns going, this is like, you know, what do they say, it's in the Navy SEALs Hell Week, right? They're on the beach, whatever. It's like what this week is, with 500 plus towns across New Jersey, all trying to do the same thing within a week's worth of time so that they can file it to meet the deadline, which is Sunday. So that's the best answer I have for you, but I do want to make it a point that we try and answer everybody's questions tonight. So if you have things that you think should be looked at after this, feel free to share them.
Well, thank you.
I have the 15-foot note, though.
Thank you, and I understand that you were, the whole thing is rigged, and I know that you were pressed and you couldn't do anything because it's the developer that has holding the you know, the case. And whoever wants to buy something and wants to build whatever they want to build, and then we have to react to it, and that's it. And
Right.
I'm sorry that you're in such a position, and I'm sorry the town is in such a position.
We'll do the best we can with it.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening, Eileen Jones. Does anyone here know when PSE&G would be scheduled to do the work between, say, Beechwood and Oradell Ave, the meters?
I don't off the top of our head, Eileen, because they just started resuming work within the last week after the snow started to clear, but we can get a better understanding of what their projected schedule is by area of town. Okay, Roger has something to offer.
No problem. I actually spoke to PSE&G this week about what the schedule is. I am due to get a full schedule by the end of the week. And then I'm also going to add that when this one wraps up, there is another major project that is about to start, again, with PSE&G. So, and I'll release those details at our next meeting on the DPW committee. So the committee will meet the Monday before our next meeting, of which we'll review all of this. But, you know, this town has been very fortunate that PSE&G has been taking on these projects because we've been able to lay more asphalt at no charge to the residents to get our roads done. So I know it's an inconvenience, but it's a short-term inconvenience for a very long-term gain.
I just know that's a very busy area, and I wanted a little heads up. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else for public comment under non-agenda? Sure.
Hello. I have a comment and also a question.
Sure.
My comment is that I looked at all the resolutions. I don't think that there's any wooded spaces or recreational spaces up for decision today. But I'm also on the swim club board. And my statement is, as a resident and as a member of the swim club board, I implore the council and mayor to protect all natural wooded spaces, all recreational spaces in the town. It's what makes Oradell beautiful. It's what makes this community a special community. So I would ask that you all exercise your absolute best efforts to protect those.
So I would answer that with they are already protected. They're listed on our recreation open space inventory that's filed with the Department of Environmental Protection. What that means is that they're designated parkland. They cannot be built on. If we did do that and we violated that listing, we would be subject to potentially have to refund any grant funding we've ever received for them, and we would neglect ourselves from ever collecting another grant again to deal with open space and recreation.
Would that include like the woods behind Memorial Field and the
Yes.
Lotus Woods? Oh, okay.
Yes, we should have on our planning board section of the website. If not, I'll make sure it's there. Our recreation open space inventory. It's a component, should be a component of our master plan where you can see all of the areas that are protected and designated, and the swim club is part of that protection.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my question is there, oh,
I just need your name, that's all.
oh,
No address.
Susan Garcia.
Okay.
My question is there any update on the water treatment plant and
No.
possible activity there?
It's in county
It's-
deliberations.
It's in limbo.
Yeah, I believe there may be some more ability to open up the riverbanks that are fenced off currently for kids to access and fishing and passive recreational use, much along the lines of what they did with the kayak dock a few
Right.
years back. But the building itself, if it were an easy solution, it probably would have been handled already, but
Sure.
that's in the county's,
In the county's hands?
in the county's hands, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Tom Beltoff, 74 Beechwood Road. I just have a comment and a question based on comments you made, Jim. You know, I realize a lot of time's been spent on what's happening in this state, which I called previously legalized extortion, which it is, and we all know it is, whether that's not a legal term, but it's legalized extortion. But outside of the multiple towns, the municipalities that were involved in a lawsuit and sort of peripherally involved with the lawsuit, you know, I know this, but you know, you mentioned that we gave the best answer we can, and I'm going to have some questions related to the individual ordinances, but some of those ordinances are significantly worded, okay? And if we're just giving the best answer just to, you made a comment that we can go back and change. I'm concerned on putting too much information that you're going to lock yourself in, you know, that's a comment. The question I have is recognize the number of municipalities involved in this. Was any coordination done with the other municipalities to how to address the answers and to get to this stupid deadline? Or do we do it all on our own? No offense, everybody works a lot of time and effort, but I'm not sure that all these towns have subject matter experts related to having to really react to something that's going to significantly impact our town and
Right.
most towns in Bergen County, if not the state. So one, did we coordinate anything with the other towns after the lawsuit, recognizing we have to have this tight deadline? Answer, yes or no?
So we did coordinate with other towns in terms of the lawsuit that we joined, which, as you indicated, was not successful. It went to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was declined to
No,
be
I'm not
heard.
talking about the legal side, Jim. I'm talking about
I'm
the
getting-
document that
Tom,
has to be
I'm
issued
getting-
by the
I'm
deadline,
getting to the answer.
right?
You're
Right.
asking the question, I'm
Okay,
answering
go
it.
ahead. Apology.
We did collaborate on the legal side. That was as far as we could collaborate. Each town has its own unique set of situations in terms of land that's available for development, property owners who may want to redevelop to help the town achieve what their burden is. And believe it or not, I think, Jeff, about 70-plus towns your firm represents?
Over 100.
Over 100. So each town has retained, which if you want to look at, sorry, Jeff, waste of consultant resources having to be duplicated over 500 times throughout the state on the same issue.
Again, I'm
Yeah.
not here to insult anybody on the mayor council. I know you
Understood.
all spend a lot of time, and, you know, this is, you know, this really requires, and I appreciate having the professionals, you know, that we're paying for, and they should be subject matter experts, I would expect, you know, so.
Yeah.
Mayor,
but, you know,
may I add something to this conversation? I think the root of the problem is the legislation. I think the legislation is abomination. It has many flaws, including unreasonable deadlines. I went to every single hearing of every Senate committee, of every Assembly committee. I filed writings. I said, this is a mistake. This is no way to build a better policy. And I can tell you that the first meeting I went to in December of 2023 was the Housing Committee of the Assembly. And the woman who ran that committee said, we have to act on this. We got to get it through lame duck. So the legislature was silent, didn't hear a peep for years, and all of a sudden it was Pearl Harbor, and it was going to be rammed through. And I did my best to slow it down and say, but what about this? But what about that? I even was part of a group that wrote an amendment to the act that would, in my opinion, would have been legally defensible, that would have made the numbers far more reasonable. And a bunch of towns, including Oradell, adopted resolutions supporting it, but it didn't get enough traction to go through. So I feel your pain. I agree. that
Everybody
the
here
legislation
has a lot
is
of pain,
problem.
and everybody up there, or residents of this town, have a lot of pain. The problem is, once you build it, okay, it's gone, okay? Regardless of who's in the goddamn government, okay? You build these properties, you know, Bank of America property, that beautiful corner property, what they put up, that's there forever now, okay? And it's sad, we're overdeveloping so many things, and it's absurd, okay? But we're all handcuffed. We can't do anything other than raise our taxes because they don't care about infrastructure costs. You know what it's going to do, and you know this, it's going to impact our schools, our police, our fire, our water, our electricity, right down the line. We individually are going to be paying for that, and the members of Oradell that are on the council there. It's an abomination of legislature that everyone in this room should be appalled at, and everybody on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else for non-agenda items?
Hi. Since it was brought up,
Could you just state your name, please?
Lorraine Bogert,
Thank you,
83
Lorraine.
Wanamaker. I'm asking about the land between Wanamaker and Parcells. And I guess Commander Black, I don't know how far it goes, but there was surveys done to eliminate streets. So if there was streets there, I'm wondering, I know it's probably all wetlands, but is that on the inventory, the
It is.
environmental inventory? So why were there streets?
There were paper streets, as if they were to be extended at some point. We eliminated those, and we added that and merged it into the larger DPAC complex as part of our recreational facility there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Kathy Sears, 761 Park Avenue. Just a quick question. I may be late to the party, but a little while back there was a survey done in the woods adjacent to Park Avenue, behind Memorial Field. Can you tell me what the purpose of that survey was?
To put a non-invasive trail network in there for recreational purposes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Mary Margaret Carter from Park Avenue. I just wonder if there's been any attempt to change the legislation. Is there any hope that among the 500 communities, there are some representatives who would feel that they wanted to tackle this and get the law changed, which may be too late to change immediately for us, but at least may protect us a little bit more in the future?
So out of the 500-plus communities in the state, I think around 36 joined a coalition to oppose the legislation legally, and we've taken that through every court right up to the United States Supreme Court with no success to oppose the legislation.
So they can't, propose a bill and vote on it in the state legislature?
The legislature could, but we all have to get in a bus and go down to Trenton and go to the legislature and tell them that they should change this. Unfortunately, by the time we move to do that, as Tom alluded to, some things may have already occurred and some things may not, because sometimes things take longer. But we were one of the 36-plus towns that said, we don't agree with the way that you're asking us to do this, not the concept itself, and that we'd like you to change how you've prescribed that we do this. And that was not met with success.
Were you asking members of the legislature?
We were suing to stop the law.
Mayor, could I add something?
Sure, Bill.
In addition to the lawsuits, there's an entity called the League of Municipalities, which essentially every municipality in the state is a member. It's a nonprofit that advocates for municipal rights. So the League had, I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings on this after the legislation was passed, during the lawsuits, throughout this process, and also petitioned the state legislature to not do this. I think other bills were offered to change this, and they went nowhere. The votes weren't there.
Okay.
So every avenue, I believe, was exhausted.
Okay. Well, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mrs.
Hope
Carter.
that we can get some improvement.
I would say, I agree with you. The place to aim your rifles is the legislature. That's a root of this. But you need to get popular support. This bill went through on party lines, but Democrat towns are impacted as much as Republican towns. So the key is to get the Democrat towns to be willing to make changes. You have a political problem.
Tom Devine, 810 Carroll Place, Oradell. Thank you, everybody. I know the planning board's done doing a lot of work on this thing. I just like to make comment, Jim, to follow up on what Sam said. Mr. Tripp, sorry. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the planning board is kind of, I shouldn't say overwhelmed. They're doing a great job, but they're working under a lot of stress. I would suggest that maybe we get together some form of committee to help them, because I think there's a lot of things that we're not going to be able to stop. We're going to have to deal with. I know you're working on the law and everything else, but to the 15-foot setbacks, to review of traffic flow, the use of our commuter parking lots. Again, this building, when they're building next to them, maybe shouldn't have access to it. And I think there's a lot of things that we need to deal with or be prepared to deal with the reality of this stuff is going to come in some way, shape, or form. And I think the planning board is, kind of meeting the state requirement or, the town's minimum requirements of getting this stuff done. But there's chance both to protect the zoning board, the planning board, that the more of this stuff that we get the correct ordinances in now may help to protect the town later. That's the statement I like to make. And then secondly, can you address at some point during the meeting to the open public here is how this affects the tax base, most specifically in terms of the ability to tax new construction relative to the existing tax base that are in town. I think it's important that, everybody hears the reality of what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thank you for the recommendation on the committee. The tax base, unless Mr. Bailey or Mr. Hines want to provide a little bit more information, as you might have a little bit more background in this, I think I'll loosely say that new construction is generally taxed as more valuable real estate than existing housing stock. So I don't know exactly what the numbers turn out to be. We have to have our financial experts do that. We have to have our assessor as part of that exercise. But the stuff that is built, we'll be bringing in, except for the affordable units, right? So I'm going to tread lightly here, but they are not, the affordable units are not at the same level of taxation that non-affordable units are at. And Bill, maybe you can just add to that a little bit.
Yeah, what will happen is if and when some of these projects are built, they will be reassessed, something called an added assessment, so that they have a certain value now in terms of what's there currently, but if new construction's in and there's apartments, they are then valued through the tax assessor and our appraiser and will receive, again, an added assessment that will now reflect the increase in value. The tax rate itself stays the same for all properties, whether they're residential, commercial. However, the assessed value will increase, and you multiply the tax rate by the assessed value, and that's how you get the actual dollar number that they will have to pay.
Isn't there also a development fee?
Yes.
Is that substantial, or?
I didn't mean to interrupt. The development fee is really in lieu of building affordable housing. So if there's projects and what have you that go up that don't have, a commercial building, for example, it's not residential, there's fees, I forget the exact percentages.
2.5% for non-residential.
There we go. So they have to, commercial properties that they get developed have to pay a 2.5% development fee. That money then goes into the municipality's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, it's called, which is used to help offset costs related to affordable housing.
Thank you.
And promote it, yep.
Thank you.
Ramazan Üzülmez, good evening. Ramazan Üzülmez, Berkshire Street. I just realized you guys mentioned about the fees. Who's paying for those fees?
Who's paying which fees?
You just said there's going to
development
be
fees?
development fees.
The developer
And
pays those.
how is it going to affect my property values? And my tax also, am I going to pay the same tax that I am paying before, or my tax is going to increase? That's my other question.
It will depend on what your assessed value is. If you do improvements to your property, you would get an added assessment. But if someone does something on their property, that doesn't affect your assessment.
Property value is going to change or not change my property value? Let's say,
If you change your property and the change increases the value of it, your taxes will go up. If you do nothing to it, they will, other than budgetary issues,
my other question is, what is the percentage of the homeowner in this proposed area? What is the percentage of the homeowners?
I'm not sure.
I don't know that I understand the question.
So, what is the percentage of the homeowner in this area? If, let's say, this is a 98% of the homeowner in this area, how are you guys proposing to do this development? Is there any area that you guys are going to build something that we don't know?
Which area?
Well, we are here to talk about the zoning changes, right?
Correct.
That's the area that I am talking about.
So those areas are outlined within the 6 ordinances. That
Okay.
we can get into more detail when we get to each ordinance.
Okay.
But what we've done is, in accordance with the courts and the adjudicator, who's the master planner that's helping facilitate towns and objectors reach some sort of a middle ground, we're setting through zoning opportunity, not specific for a project, right? So much like you would buy a house in a zone, you want to build a house, you would be subject to the regulations of development in that zone. That's what anybody who wants to propose a new project in these zones would have to come before the board and submit a project that's compliant with this. I can tell you we're here to talk about affordable housing, so the majority of everything we're talking about is residential. There is very, very little commercial and/or office that would occur. I don't remember without looking at it which ordinance it is, but the 3 large lots on the north end of Kinderkamak Road, 690, 700, and 800, there is in that zoning a bonus to provide some commercial and office and professional so that we don't obliterate that use in town. But it's a mixed use.
Do we have any plan for this?
We
for
do not.
now?
Plans would have to be developed.
Because it would be nice if we see those plans.
Right, they have to be developed and they have to come before a land use board. Nothing we're doing here approves any project or anything that's real. The zoning just provides opportunity for somebody to develop a project in accordance with the parameters. Then they have to submit that to the building department for review, and they'll have to come to the land use board for a site plan review, at which time everything is applicable in terms of asking and getting answers to questions about traffic, about buffers, about any of these things that the zoning governs.
Mm-hmm. The height of the also buildings in this area, mostly 1 or 2 story buildings?
It depends on which zone. We're going from In the 3 lots I mentioned on Kinderkamak, the maximum height is, I believe, 4 feet, 4 stories or 48 feet, down to 2 stories in the south end of town. It varies by zone.
It varies by zone. Well, again, you know, you guys are talking about over here, but for me, everything is in the air. Even though I'm a land surveyor, I have difficulties to understand what you guys are talking about, and I feel sorry for those guys. It would be nice to have on the plan showing, hey, we are making the changes over here, and this is going to be this. So everything understandable, but now everything is in the air. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer over at Church Street. I just wanted to dovetail off that last gentleman's questions. He asked, will the value of his house go up and will his taxes go up? And I just wanted to clarify, the value of our properties will end up going up because of all this new development that's happening, correct? And when that happens, our taxes will go up as well, inevitably?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's if these properties that are subject of these ordinances under consideration tonight are actually built, their assessments, their value is going to increase. That doesn't necessarily mean a single-family homeowner that yours is.
Gotcha. Yes, that's what you said. That was your response, was that it's really your...
Unless you put an addition on a house
Right,
or something
right.
like that.
But with all these extra units, with potential families, with more potential children, with more potential, you know, like more resources that we need. We might need to hire more police officers. We might need to hire more security. We might hire more within the school. At OPS, we're already busting at the seams here, thinking about more classroom space, more teachers, more assistants, more administration. Won't that also raise our taxes inevitably?
Potentially, it's kind of an unknown. How many school children would actually be produced?
I just
by
wanted to clarify,
multifamily?
because it made it sound like our taxes are possibly not going to go up because, you know, but...
Your taxes are always going to go up.
Right.
Because the cost of things go up.
Right.
I had
every
a
budget
discussion.
year-
Maggie, we have one at a time,
But-
please.
sorry.
Bill's speaking.
I didn't hear him. I'm sorry.
The assessed value of your property doesn't necessarily go up.
Right.
The taxes you paid, as I said, is based on the assessed value times the tax rate. The
Right.
tax rate may move
Okay.
up or down, because if the town's budget is X, that's how much money has to be raised. So you don't know until...
Right, and the other unknown is depending upon what is proposed and actually built, you could assume that that's going to be assessed evaluation far greater than what exists there today, which means that that parcel in question is just going to generate more tax ratables for the town, which may offset the cost of any additional services that have to be provided. We just don't have the finality to do that exact analysis just yet, but they sort of move in concert. We may have a need for some additional services. We may find that we're at a number that we can absorb certain things. It is of great concern about things when you talk about brick and mortar, like the school, and whether or not you need capital funding to expand. But until we get a project before us by a developer who actually wants to propose something to build, it's really tough for us to give you concrete information on that financial analysis. But you know, the reality is that somebody's building something new. It's going to be, I hate to use the phrase, bigger and better than what currently exists because something's been there since the 60s or 70s. It's going to bring more rateable revenue into the town, and that may offset the increase we may have for services in some regards. It's just tough to say right this second.
There's also, if I may, Mayor, a mechanism called the special assessment, which is if there is a particular benefit to a particular piece of property that is done at the expense of the municipality can put a special assessment on that property. For example, if there's something that really directly benefits that property, not necessarily the town in general, a special assessment can be imposed, and there's a process for that, to really try and tie in as much as you can the costs related to that construction to the benefit realized by that property owner or developer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just make a
Yes.
comment? I've had an extensive conversation, several actually, with our tax officer, and I'm thanking you, Mayor, for saying what you did, because although there are complicated feelings about having multifamily units or townhouses or that sort of thing, one of the things we went over was that when there are more families owning apartments or townhouses in a property, the taxes are increasingly higher and are very supportive of our tax base. So despite the complex feelings we all have about having multifamily buildings and townhouses, et cetera, there is a real possibility, as the mayor pointed out, that it will be very supportive of our tax base. But until we actually see proposals, it's a speculation. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Maggie.
Hi, Anthony Bocci here. Just a quick commentary to piggyback off the last comment about assessed value of property. So if you are within sight lines of a 4-story development, you could bet your price values, your home value is going to decrease and not increase. That's just, I wanted to clarify that.
I'm not a tax assessor. I'm not a tax assessor, but I don't know that that's 100% accurate. We can ask the tax assessor.
To piggyback off of that, I live on Demorest Avenue, Oradell. I'm representing Art Malin on Oakley, which is part of that circle. And that last comment about property value decreasing, I fully agree with that. Because if you have a basically apartment building next to private residential establishments buildings, the private property values will go down. Therefore, their assessment should go down, or at least their taxes should go down, but the value of the home going down is now a loss. That's all I have to say.
Good evening, everybody. Michael Corso, 731 Midland Road. My question's a little bit different. You heard Sam Tripsis and somebody else talk about some of the important historic sites in our town, one of which is the Blauvelt, the other one is the Waterworks, two of which, I think both are probably two of the most important sites in Bergen County. I think they're imperative that we preserve them. So my question to the council is, well, first, I think you're going to hear a lot about the historic nature of our town and how people are really proud of Oradell and how they want thoughtful redevelopment. So one of the things, I had been part of the Historic Preservation Committee in the past. I have young kids now, so I've taken a little bit of a back seat. Maggie's been on the board. I know, Tom, you've been involved a little bit in that. Before COVID, we got into this conversation about historic preservation. We haven't really done much with it since. My concern as a 10-year citizen, or resident rather, of this community is that we haven't really had thoughtful historic preservation at our, in conjunction with development. What is the plan moving forward for these big sites and for these big projects and for keeping the integrity of the town as it relates to historic preservation? Has there been any consideration for a regulatory committee to provide historic oversight and keeping the integrity of the town with these massive projects that we're undertaking?
So aside from the one site that Sam has spoken extensively about at 445 Kinderkamak, none of the sites on the north end of town have historic significance. The Blauvelt Mansion site obviously does. That's been removed from our discussion as a site potentially to be used for affordable housing. Jeff, Bill, I would ask you, does historic preservation or our desire to, engage in more aggressive historic preservation have any impact as it relates to the implementation of this law?
We argued historic preservation. We argued historic preservation and try to tamp down some of the densities, but the regulations, the law on this, a site has to be on the National Historic Record. to be able to protect an area within vicinity of
Okay.
that. We don't have any.
So why hasn't Oradell designated any of these sites so that we could protect it and maybe possibly get grants or protect some of the sites? Because what I'm watching as a citizen is some of these, for lack of a better term, eyesores being erected throughout our neighborhoods. We live in a pretty historic neighborhood. You're watching, you know, I don't know if you mean this in a general sense, but we're watching the demolition of houses, the demolition of neglect for the Blauvelt Mansion. And I know a lot of this is out of our control, right? But the individual houses, I'm not telling people how to paint their houses. That's the last thing. I think thoughtful and meaningful progress as it relates to historic preservation would actually help the town when they go to do these massive projects. Because what I think some of the concern will be not only the proximity to some of these sites and proximity to some of the residential properties, it's what they're actually going to look at. You don't have to look very far. You can just go over to Ridgewood and watch thoughtful planning happen. You can actually see meaningful input from some of the people that really care about the town. I'm seriously concerned about what this town is going to look at with the massive projects and what it's going to look like in 15 years, in 20 years. I love this town. There's a reason I moved here from Paramus, because I watch it become 10 pounds of whatever in a 5-pound bag. The last thing I want to see as an Oradell resident is the overdevelopment, and I think you're obviously starting to see it, but no thought given whatsoever into what it actually looks like. So letting all of this overdevelopment happen, to me, is a huge mistake, and I'd love to see at some point some sort of regulatory commission, or at least thought to, hey, how do we bring this forward? What is a way in which we can actually successfully manage historic integrity, protecting, Oradell Heights or whatever you want to call it in that section, down by Park, down by 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, because they're beautiful homes, right? And the last thing, it's going to creep, and then all of a sudden we're going to be at an impasse, and then it's going to be too far gone. So my appeal to you is, please give it some thought, take it, and and look to what else can be done rather than just putting up these huge monolithic looking types of structures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Christiane Dyson, 86 Elliott. So 2 comments and a few questions. So our schools are one of the reasons why my husband and I have invested moving here in Oradell before we even had kids. I was wondering, with the affordable housing planning, has the town worked with the Board of Education to estimate how many students this development could generate? And then with that, if the student enrollment increases, what plans are in place to ensure that the class sizes and student-to-teacher ratios are not negatively affected?
So to answer your question, we have not yet, until we have a particular project before us with a floor plate that shows the distribution of the size units, i.e. a 1-bedroom unit is not likely to generate children in that unit, especially if it's a rental. We need more information about the specificity of what's being built on what site. I've spoken with Dr. Albro at the high school. I have yet to have a conversation with Superintendent Bozios about having both of them and a board member from both Riverdale and OPS work with borough officials on a committee that evaluates just that. What impact may this have on both school systems, and how can we have a thoughtful conversation about what that is, and how do we plan for it? So that's the next discussion to be had, because we don't have any specifics before us just yet as it relates to the projects themselves.
Okay, and just piggybacking off of that. So our town and River Edge shares the middle school and then also the high school. So if we anticipate to have 150 units affordable housing, and say maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms, it is really hard to get 1 bedroom, right? Do we then assume that between 1 and 2 kids for each unit, right? Then maybe that would generate 300 kids for the town of Oradell. This is just maybe thinking ahead rather than just tackling it down when we already have the plan. Because if we do have 300 kids generated off of those from Oradell, and then River Edge as well, we're talking about 600 kids. Where are they going to go to school, and what's going to happen to my kids?
Right. I don't know that we'll have 600 kids. The honest answer is, I don't know how many kids that it may generate. If Carolyn wants to add anything, at the time a developer proposes a project, they obviously have a track record with developments and how they want to gear their model, right? So some may say, hey, I really like one-bedroom apartments because they rent for more than a two-bedroom apartment does if you look at it on a per square foot basis within the building. So they make more money on a one-bedroom than a two-bedroom, so they want more of those. Those would be less susceptible to support family habitation. But with the affordable housing, they're required to develop building floor plates with certain bedroom distributions so that there's equitable opportunity for what might we expect when a developer proposes a project for them to have their discussion, or for us to ask this exact same question of them about how many children do you think what you're proposing may generate for the borough?
So that's a great question, and that comes up quite often in the planning board and the zoning board hearings when these developments are being considered. And sometimes there are those discussions amongst the developers. I do hear what you're saying about the school, and I think another woman indicated, that the school district was bursting at the seams. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but that's what I heard. And I know there's a lot of concern about that. And I know you shared the schools with River Edge, which I'm not involved in, but I'm going to take a guess is going through a very similar process right now, because over hundreds and hundreds of municipalities are. To the mayor's point, it's something that is looked at with respect to the developments, and I do know that your town is having open dialogue with the Board of Ed. It is my understanding boards of education do long-range planning where they look at proposed developments and what might be coming down the pike, but that's a separate discussion. For better or worse, this affordable housing process does not take into account impacts to the school system.
That's
the Mount
really
Laurel process
unfortunate.
does not. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. What did you say?
I said that's really unfortunate if that's not even
That's
thought
one of the-
about.
That's one of the major problems
Yeah.
with the doctrine.
No, I agree.
You can't defend what we don't want to zone that site because of school age impact, because that argument has been knocked down many times.
Yeah, that's truly unfortunate. And I guess my other point or thing is that, as the other gentleman had mentioned, if these developments are well thought of, then it could increase the property value, right? And bring our taxes, hopefully the same, higher. However, if these are not well thought of, our property values could go down because of overcrowding and also the traffic pattern. So I'm just, please, let's really think about where we want these affordable housing to go, because it really would impact everybody in this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Romano Pajednik. I live on Beverly Road in Berkshire. And the whole block is up for development. The thing is, those small, they're almost 100 years old, the houses. I've lived there since I grew up in New Jersey, moved to New York, to Brooklyn, and back to New Jersey. I lived in Brownstone, Brooklyn. It was beautiful, but I was looking at a building. Well, now, on my little 50 by 100 lot, the back of my house is at the 50-foot sign. So I will be 60 feet from a building. And that building, if it's 3 stories, 4 stories, I couldn't figure it out from the zoning. I read through it, but there's a slope. So if it's, let's say it's 35 feet, it's gonna be, I don't know, 40, 50. That will be 60 feet from the back of my house. I can't live like that. I am 2 years away from paying my mortgage. And we struggled a lot of years. And I am so pissed that I'm sitting here worrying about my there's no way my house is going to be worth more with a giant building in the backyard. Are my flowers going to live? Am I going to have air to breathe? Will it be a parking lot or a driveway? And it's awful, and I'm so upset because my future, our retirement, we don't have a lot of money where we live. So that house, I'm depending on someday maybe selling it or maybe staying, but now I can't. Now I'm going to be running from this thing. And it just pisses me off that the house, that now I'm paying $14,000 in taxes a year for a shoebox. Now I have to put my house on the market because I cannot stay someplace where my house is going to be worth nothing, because my husband and I actually kind of have to either live there or use that money. And I'm so mad, and I just can't even believe this. I mean, years ago, we struggled to put a deck on it, had to get a variance, and now I'm going to have a giant building in my backyard. And I'm sick about it, and I just can't even believe it.
Could you repeat what street you live on?
I live on Beverly in Berkshire.
Beverly, okay.
So I live right next to the vet,
So if
Dr. Hurst.
If I could answer one question you have
Yes.
that might ease your tensions a little. That area is only proposed for a second story above the
Oh.
existing commercial.
Okay.
So to a
Well, that's-
degree, whether it's the kitchen designer on the corner or just a little north of that, there is a second story of apartments on the one building.
Okay.
That's all you would see there.
All right, that's a little,
And the only
that's a
thing,
little better.
the only thing was to provide opportunity for housing
Yeah.
above the ground floor commercial.
okay, well, that's.
That's all that's being
You made
proposed
me
for
feel
there.
better, and I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to see you're under such
bad
duress
things. I'm just a
about
little
this.
upset. I've lived here for almost 30 years, and we're 23 payments away from paying the house off, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the other thing is if you need to all look at the maps, because the larger developments are those huge buildings on Kinderkermack that are already large buildings. And we tried to utilize areas that were already of scale, and that those can be more productive to support our tax base, et cetera, et cetera.
Want to say that again? Single-family home turning into 25 units?
Can you wait till you come up? Because I can't hear you from where you're sitting. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hi. First of all, my name is Cheryl Ziller. I live at 33 Beverly Road on the corner of Beverly and Berkshire. I want to thank all of you for the time that you give to the town and for everything that you're looking to accomplish. I realize, Mayor, you really walked into something when you ran for mayor. And I give you a lot of credit for stepping up, considering what was left behind for you. And I appreciate how difficult this is for everyone. I want to thank Councilman Passion for recusing himself from involvement in all of this development, because I think it says a lot about him and about his contribution to the town, which is many, many years. I think it says a lot about his integrity, and I do appreciate that. I am happy to hear that we are looking at 2 levels, because I really will miss the sunsets if it goes any higher than that. But I do have concerns about the construction that's going on, and I know that I have put it on Facebook. We wound up with an amazing rat problem in my neighborhood as a result of the construction that was done down by the railroad tracks. My question is, what are we going to do to prevent this from being a continuing problem? Because this is a health issue. I mean, this is serious. I had like 15, 20 rats in my house over the winter time. I had to have Viking come. I have black bait boxes all over my yard, and I have an electrocution chamber in my kitchen. Nobody should have to live this way because of development.
Right.
I am even closer to paying off my home than Sue. I'm done paying it off July 1st. I've been here since 1999. I am a single mother putting my kid through college, and I'm working real damn hard just to be able to afford to do what needs to be done to give my son a better future. And part of that better future absolutely did come from the education he received here. And I am 1,000% appreciative of that. But I do have concerns about what the town is allowing to go on, and the fact that there's no control over many of these things. I mean, if I called the police department, and this was very upsetting to me, When the last snowstorm happened, I called the police department because it is impossible to get out of my street onto Kinderkamak Road as it is. The snow was plowed so high that coming on the left side, I couldn't see anyone coming down Kinderkamak Road. I called the police department and was told by the desk sergeant, "Lady, what would you like me to do about it?" Okay? I said, well, here's the thing. I said, you can just leave it, and that's totally fine with me. I said, but when you have accidents happening up there and people are dying up there because there is a sight problem from the traffic that's coming past, just remember, I'm going to let the council know that I called you and that we had this conversation. I was appalled at the lack of concern for people's safety when I called the police department. I am concerned about what's being built up there, and there's already enough of a traffic problem in that area. My son, I had to drive him to school because he couldn't get safely across that street. Okay, now he's in college. I really don't want to sell my home. I've been here since 1999. I've worked very hard for that home. I finally got the outside looking okay as a single, self-supporting person working 4 jobs. I really want to stay. But if you're going to overdevelop it, and I'm going to have to live with rats in my house, and I'm going to have to live with overdevelopment and overabundance of impervious surface that's going to cause flooding in my basement more than what I already have, I'm not going to have any choice but to go. And I really don't want to do that. So I wanted to make sure that I explained to you guys that every single one of these decisions that you make with regard to how you develop an area has an absolute direct effect on the health and safety and well-being of the residents in that area. And that's all I really wanted to say. I just want to make sure that everybody is cognizant and mindful of the fact that we're not just talking about the Mount Laurel doctrine, we're talking about people, and we're talking about their well-being, and we're talking about their safety and a quality of life, because we deserve a quality of life as well.
Right. So one thing I would just add to build on what you were expressing your concern about is that currently the only properties that we're facing pressure to allow something to happen on is in the north end of town. The changing of the B3 to a B1 zone, which just allowed residential on the second floor, is something akin to what was done in the last round of our COA compliance, where there was a central business district created that was an overlay zone that allowed for an area to have a floor of residential on the east side of the street and up to 2 floors of residential on the west side of the street. And that was to take into account some of what you're describing with the topographic changes all along Kinderkamak. Unless there's a willing property owner that wants to come forward and say, I want to make these changes, they generally don't happen. What we're faced with uniquely is that back in the 70s, I think, is when the large office buildings were constructed on the north end of town. That was a great land use for the town at the time. It didn't contribute, head count to the town. It provided ratables. The market is very different today on what office space is worth versus what somebody else views its potential worth at. And that's where we're receiving the pressure, is to say, we want to take a use that, is not as valuable and turn it into something more valuable. But the further south you go, and specifically with your area of Kinderkamak, the lots are smaller. And it's really tough for somebody to go in and aggregate a number of lots to be able to say they can make a development financially sustainable for them to undertake, unless it's a vacant piece of property and they're the owner.
My concern is what's up the block on Kinderkamak Road. That's really ultimately my concern.
Up the block where?
Up on Kinderkamak Road, where Town and Country Kitchens is, and
Right.
where Nick and Van's Nails are.
Right.
I'm looking, and you have to understand too, the pictures that we were provided to work with.
Yeah.
They're
not the
very
clearest.
clear.
Understood.
And you're asking us to look at something. I'm not a land surveyor. I don't have any idea what I'm actually looking at. And you're asking residents to sit and look at something and be able to extrapolate from what we're seeing exactly what your plan is. We don't know. And we need someone to explain it to us, because it is important. It's important for our future. And I'm sorry, but I I'm really in fear of winding up with my house full of rats again. I have to be honest with you. I shouldn't have to live that way. And I shouldn't have to keep calling Viking. Those rats did thousands of dollars of damage to my home. My plumbing in my kitchen was destroyed. They chewed through the pipes. They chewed through the drain hoses to my washer and dryer in the basement. They chewed through everything. Nobody should have to live that way. So my question really at this point is, what does the town plan to do when you start shaking up all of these properties and these empty vacant lots where these rats have made homes?
Right.
What do you guys intend to do about it?
It's a
because
fair
I can't
question.
afford to keep having this fight.
Right. It's a fair question. We're going to have a plan for that.
Yeah, because I keep getting told that, well, I'm sorry, but you own that problem. I shouldn't own that problem because the problem was fine until the town allowed them to build those houses, the condos or whatever the hell they are down by the railroad tracks. I never had a problem with rats in my home ever. They were down by the river, they were down by the railroad tracks. I never had any problems with this. In over 22 years that I lived in that house until they started building. And I want to be sure that my home is going to be safe. They're chewing through everything, and they're horrible, and I can't afford it, and it's pestilence. It is disease, and nobody should have to live like that.
Agreed.
And I do thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate everything you guys do.
Hello, my name is Jitendra, and I live in Elliott Court. So my first question, very basic, is right behind Elliott Court, which is between McKay and Rees Avenue, there is a green zone. That remains intact, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the commercial area behind that will get, if I understand correctly, will get converted to B1 zone. And my only concern is that we need to maintain the green zone. If we ever decide to make like a 35 feet high story building, then we need to make sure the green zone is at least we have the evergreen trees built up to have the privacy, because I don't want people to do it. And if there's any possibility of not having a 35 feet story building, that will be one. Another big thing is, as everybody pointed, that the McKay Avenue leads directly to the high school. My kids go to the high school. There's no sidewalk all the way to the end of to the high school. So the kids end up walking on the road. And when I need to go anytime from McKay Avenue, make a left on the Kinderkamak, during rush hours, it's impossible. So what I'm looking for is some kind of a traffic study needs to be done. Some level of service needs to be installed before we ever even decide to make this commercial to an extent. Because if again, maybe I misunderstood the whole concept, but if the concept was to housing, then let's just bring single family houses to check the box. By making two-story building, it not only increases the traffic, which I really want to make sure that a proper study needs to be done. And the second thing is the green zone needs to be baked into the ordinance. It should be baked in so that I just don't want this to be a privacy issue with my house, with all the green zone behind my address. So two concerns I need to highlight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else for non-agenda items?
Good evening, Council. I'm glad to see. Thank you for all the people who came in, all the Oradell residents. I see there's a lot of people who are concerned about the quality of life in this town, and that's very good. To the person that spoke earlier about property values and increase, decrease in property values, I want to let you know if you want to come in 2 weeks for the next council meeting. I'm going to be talking.
Right. You need to address the council, not the audience.
Okay. I just want to say that in the next meeting, I am going to talk about the problems that affect our property values a lot more than the developments that's going in this town. And that is a problem that basically everyone until now was kicking the can down the road. And the can, the latest kick is the implement of the Narcan boxes around here. And that's the opioid problems in Riverdale High School. And that will one day kick us all in the face, that problem. And I'm going to talk about it in the next meeting. So again, good evening, the council. I would really like to thank the councilmen who took the time and called me to ask for the safety of my family. As someone who has a big family in Israel right now that is being attacked by missiles in the past few days. And the latest one just happened at 6:50, 45 minutes before this meeting began. And my 88-year-old parents, both my mother and father, had to run again into the bomb shelter for the 7th time in a day. And it's not new. For those who wanted to know, I grew up this way. I grew up this way from 1967 when the place where I grew up was attacked by missiles. And then in 1973, again, the entire place, and I had to sleep in a bomb shelter for months because the place where I grew up was destroyed. And later on, when as I grew up, it was something almost common. There's a siren, you only have 55 seconds to be in a bomb shelter. So now many homes have a safe room inside them. People can go inside, but my parents don't have that. And then I'm sending my daughter in 2006 to visit my family, and all of a sudden, rocket attacks while my daughter there. And I shared this one. This is from the record from 2006. Cameraman, you can zoom on that. Okay? And it basically reads, Nazareth rocket attack stirs memories for Oradell men. This is a picture of my daughter sleeping in the same bomb shelter that I used to sleep in at her age, okay? And that was from 20 years ago. That has not stopped. So I really thank those who, from the council, who are concerned about the safety of my family. And with that, I will continue to another council person who keeps going online, and I don't think it's too respectful for another council person to go online and bash our president and bash the war and complains about the cost of what this war costing us. I know they claim it's $2 billion a day, but that council person never complained about the $3 billion, not the $2 billion the war cost, $3 billion this country is paying every day for interest on the national debt. $3 billion. Or the illegal immigration that cost this country $500 million a day. $500 million a day. They never complain about this, okay? And then another council person in the last meeting mentioned something about ICE and the raids, but they never complained that it was allowed to have all these people in the first place in here. So now they complain when these people needs to be removed or get their status fixed. And from that war, I just want to say one more thing. October 23rd, 1983, I, as a young tank commander on my third tour in Lebanon, witnessed the horror of the Marine barracks bombing 241 American Marines died. October 23rd, 1983. As a young tank commander, I was called to secure the area so another bombers, where they used to come in and bomb the field hospital that was built to save the injured people. And my duty with my regiment was to secure the area so they don't come in and they don't bomb the field hospital, because those people are cruel, okay? This was all Iran. Everything was from Iran. And so we all need to be behind our soldiers and make sure they have our back and not have anything negative, so it takes the wind out the sails of our soldiers.
Mr. Katzen, I need you to wrap it up.
Okay. So, and from our live soldiers, I just want to amend from the dead soldiers, in 2.5 weeks, the anniversary of Sergeant David Salinas. All of you got today the email with my proposal that I'm working on for 2.5 years, and I'm asking you to please consider it. Sergeant David Salinas needs to be remembered and memorized in this town, and it is very important, and for 2.5 years, nothing has been done.
So, Mr. Katzen, I'm not going to drag this out because we got to get to the affordable housing stuff, but I disagree with you that nothing has been done, and we can discuss that at a future meeting. I'm happy to have that dialogue, but I want to acknowledge, I mean, I've sat and listened to this a lot. I think this town has done a lot to honor Sergeant Salinas, and we will continue to do more to honor Sergeant Salinas, but to be continued at a future meeting, if that's okay with you.
Of course it's okay. I just had to mention that. Thank you so much, Mayor, and I'm glad that something is being done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for non-agenda?
Good evening. My name is Poonam Nagpal. I live on 70 Elliott Court. So you have been listening to people concerned here, showing their, grief about this development. Nobody is happy about it. My question from you is, what is the next step for you? Like, are you giving some, some concern, show, prevent any development, or is just you have to follow the law that New Jersey has passed?
So, Jeff, I'd ask you to just, big overview, briefly address that question, please.
Okay. Is now the time for the big picture?
No, but I think you can talk about what happens tonight and then what happens after tonight,
Okay.
right?
We have the statute that is the root of the problem requires that we submit all of our ordinances and resolutions by March 15th. So that's a deadline that we're up against. And so, the reason why we're here tonight, and I'll go into more detail later, is what do we have to do to protect ourselves? Because if we don't, there's developers that will demand far more than we think is reasonable.
So are we going for it, or is there any chances of preventing it?
Jeff, can I?
Sure.
So there's no chances of sidestepping this, that nothing is going to happen. But to summarize what Mr. Seranian said, we participated in a program where we tried to mediate differences between what developers wanted to do and what we felt crossed the line and compromised the character of our community. What was asked was way more than we're considering here this evening, by almost 2/3 more, which we found absolutely unreasonable, and we were ready, there was a line in the sand we absolutely would not cross. Where we're at was that the program asked us, in order to indemnify or give us immunity for the next 10 years from developers suing us to say, you don't want to allow for affordable housing, so this is what we want to do, and they would be allowed to do it. Without that immunity, we'd have no say. We would have no voice at the table. What we're doing tonight, although it may not be the exact voice we want to use, is, I'll call it a compromised voice, to say, this is us controlling the discussion with the developers versus being dictated to. What happens after we adopt these ordinances is that developers may or may not come in with specific proposals for parcels that they would use these parameters to develop. And I would say the one, specifically, the number I had a miss for, but it talks about the density of housing. These are the 3 large parcels. We talk about 28 units of development per acre, where one developer wanted 59 units of development per acre. So if we don't move ahead on something, we will be told what we're going to accept, not what we're willing to plan for. And I think from our shoes, we'd much rather be heard at a table with a voice and be in the driver's seat of what we think we may be able to mitigate and work with versus having no control over what happens to the future of our community.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your answer. Another question is, I'm concerned more about the Subaru, lot that you are thinking of, because that is right across my house. So how are you planning to have the parking lot, or parking for the people who will be living there?
There are currently no plans before the borough to develop that site in any way, and that's not to say that the owner of the property may not submit plans in the future. We all know there were plans in the past that went before the zoning board and were declined. The owner would have to submit new plans to be considered for development on that site. There's currently nothing before us.
So, I don't know if I understand correctly here. So the plan was originally to build the shops on the first floor and the second floor is residential?
That's what we're saying for the entire zone that we're looking to recategorize from a B3 to a B1. There would be ground floor, commercial, office, retail type use, and there would be residential above that.
So just one floor?
Yes.
But yeah, thing is, you have to have a parking for people there, right? So is it going to be underground or where will be the parking?
It would all be determined at the time an application was submitted and it went before a land use board for review.
Just be mindful, the traffic will be a mess there. Already there is a mess.
Right.
My daughter comes from the school and other one comes from the college. We are very, concerned about the safety there. It's hard to cross the road there. And nobody is following the speed limit. People drive at 50 miles per hour, the speed limit is 30 miles per hour there. Right. And in the night, I was crossing the road, and even after flashing the light, people did not stop. So just be mindful of the traffic, what we are going into it, that's the thing.
Understood. All those things would be reviewed on an application by application basis.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for non-agenda items?
I just want to add one more thing. Affordable housing, it really sounds nice. If you guys are coming from outside Oradell to this town, but who wants to live in an affordable housing area? To be honest with you, I don't. And I don't think anybody wants to live in an affordable housing area. So I don't want to have a neighbor moving every 6 months in and out, or I don't know who is living next to me. And I bet none of you live in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to close for non-agenda items.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now open to the public for consent agenda items only, which is resolutions 26-74 through 26-77. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is now open for the 4 resolutions in case anybody has a comment on them. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Laura, can you read the correspondence, please?
Number 1, a letter from the Borough of River Edge regarding their housing element and fair share plan. Number 2, a letter from Borough of Harworth regarding their housing element and fair share plan. Number 3, a letter from Dumont regarding their affordable housing. It was one of their ordinances that they had to send out. Number 4 is a letter from St. Joseph's School regarding potential interest in securing a Class 3 officer posted in their school for discussion.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of resolutions 26-74, 75, 76, and 77. Does any member of the council wish to pull an item for separate discussion and/or vote?
Mayor, I would just like to thank you for Resolution 2677, which came out of, Jeff Gottheimer sent me a note saying that there was a grant available, and I want to thank the borough and all the people who worked on this to quickly put forward an application, including the mayor having coffee with Josh Gottheimer. And I think it's wonderful that there's money that's available and that they jumped on it, and hopefully we'll get a grant.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anyone else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolutions 26-74, 75, 76, and 77.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Tashian?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare? Yes. Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yep.
may I request a break? Thank you.
Sure, 1 second, Jeff. Just let Councilman Tashian has a statement to make, and then we can take that brief
No problem.
adjournment.
So as I have recused myself from all fair share housing due to conflict of interest, I will recuse myself from today, from today's further meetings. What I will say is that this council has worked tirelessly to get this to this level. I know there have been a lot of comments, and so I'm going to speak very openly about my involvement. I am a realtor by trade. That is my profession and what I do to feed my family. A few years ago, I sold a property that is currently in discussion, so that immediately makes it a conflict of interest for me. But, I know what the mayor and council are trying to accomplish, and while I've recused myself from every discussion, I see what's happening in every town in our neighborhood. All of our surrounding towns, et cetera, you've seen the correspondence that was just read in. So I thank the mayor and council for what they've done, and I know that they've done everything they can to manage what's going on in our town. I have always made myself available, so if anybody has any concerns about anything I've done, you can always reach out to me. I am always in town, my office is in town, and I make myself available. So, again, thank you, everybody who sits up here.
Thank you, Councilman Tashian. Okay, 5 minutes, good, Jeff? Okay, motion to take a brief 5-minute recess?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. If we can reconvene the meeting, please. I don't know. Heat. Bear. Okay, we're going to reconvene the meeting at 9:23. Not really sure what's coming at us from under the stage here, but if we disappear, come help us. So before we move on to consideration of Resolution 2678, I want to take a second to reintroduce from our previous meeting about these issues, our professional team. We have Fran Reiner from FAR Design, who's our special redevelopment planner. We have Jeff Seranian from the Office of Seranian, Edwards, Buzek, and Nolan, our Affordable Housing Council. And we have Carolyn Ryder, our borough planner from T&M Associates. I'm going to ask Jeff to give a brief overview about the section of the meeting we're about to transition into, which will talk to the resolution setting forth the reasons for adopting these following ordinances and giving you just again a brief overview of the package of what we're attempting to accomplish here tonight. Jeff, please. Just turn the volume all the way up and speak into the thing if you can. I think it has to do with the heat. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me? No.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me now? All right. All right, there's a package of ordinances and resolutions before the borough tonight that they need to vote on. But there's a context within which these ordinances and resolutions arise. So what I'd like to do is provide that context. I'm an expert in affordable housing. I've been doing this for over 40 years. My firm represents, at one point, over 100 towns. I'm not sure what we have now. So I've been doing this a long time, and this is our focus. But in order to understand this, it's not as if the town has a lot of choices here. To understand the Mount Laurel Doctrine, there's two things that are important, undergirding principles that are important to understand. One is immunity. I'm okay. And one is the builder's remedy. What the builder's remedy is if a town fails to comply, a developer can sue that town and demand, density and everything on their wish list, provided that they make 20% of the units affordable. It takes away the municipality's home rule, it takes away the municipality's control, and the desire to avoid a builder's remedy is so strong that if you look at the 440 towns that filed lawsuits pursuant to this new legislation, it was the fear of the builder's remedy that was driving it. They didn't want to get run over by developers. And the best way of describing a proposal of a developer in a builder's remedy lawsuit is shameless. That's not hype, that's not exaggeration, that's the reality of a builder's remedy lawsuit. That's been the experience of municipalities throughout the state, and that's why they seek immunity. What immunity does is it gives you a protection from the builder's remedy. If a developer sues you and says, I want a builder's remedy, if you have immunity, you get to say, no, you're not entitled to leverage me. I'm entitled to protect myself. I'm entitled to control my zoning destiny. So those are the principles that are very important to understand. Now, to provide some context for these ordinances and resolutions, I'll begin 40 years into the process. March 2024, the Fair Housing Act is amended in the Murphy administration. I was talking about it before. They rammed it through. It went through on a partisan vote, and there's many, many things wrong with it. But it's a hand that's been dealt to us. And so we're all acting within the context of this legislation. This legislation established a process. Step one in the process is the municipality had to file a lawsuit in January of 2025, committing to comply and committing to a number that they didn't really have any control over. It was all set forth in the legislation. If the town took that step, the next step in the process was June of 2025. By June of 2025, they had to file what's called a housing element and fair share plan. It's here's our number, here's how we're going to satisfy it. And then following that submission in June of 2025, there was an objection period that ran through the end of August. Okay, and during that period, anyone that didn't like their zoning, anyone that didn't think we were doing enough for affordable housing, they could come in and object. And then the final step of this process is once the objections are filed, you have until December 31st, 2025 to participate in mediation. That's the process. And then the next landmark step of this process is March 15th of 2026. That's the deadline for municipalities to adopt all the ordinances, all the resolutions that are part of the plan that evolved from this process. Throughout the state, you're not alone. There's over 400 towns that are doing what this town is doing. They're adopting all the resolutions and ordinances so that they get protection, so that they maintain immunity, so that they're not victims of builders' remedy lawsuits. Okay? And so, so what happened, and so the way this process is also structured is there's like two stages. Stage one, there's this entity called the program, so we're assigned a program judge. The judge is assigned an adjudicator to help him or her oversee mediation. That's part one. And then it goes from, and then the program judge makes a recommendation to the county judge, because the program judge is not a real judge in that they're part of the executive branch, not the judicial branch. They can only make recommendations. But real judges, county judges, can make decisions. So then phase two is we go to a county judge, and then the county judge decides whether to accept or reject the recommendations of the program judge. So that's the process, that's the context. Now, where we are in that process is Oradell, like over 400 other municipalities, filed a declaratory judgment action in January of 2025 to bring themselves under the protections of this new legislation and to get immunity, at least temporarily. And to keep that immunity, we had to adopt the plan by June of 2025. We did that as well. Then there was the objection process. There were 5, I believe it was, objections that were filed in the objection process. 1 by Fair Share Housing Center and 4 by 4 different developers. Okay, so we went through mediation. We settled with 1 of those 5 objectors. We did not settle with the rest. The program judge then made his recommendations to the county judge, Judge Coriston, and now we're in front of Judge Coriston. So that's the big picture. That's where we are. What we need to do to maintain protection is we need to adopt a number of resolutions and ordinances by the March 15th deadline. And so all these ordinances and resolutions in front of you are part of a package. What occurred over the course of mediation is we needed to try to find the best way to protect the town. Now, we could have said, we're not doing anything, go jump in a lake. Englewood Cliffs did that. It didn't end well. Developers brought a builder's remedy lawsuit. They ran over the town, okay? But we tried to control that. In the mediation process, we had one developer that wanted 59 units an acre. That didn't make sense. So we had to try to manage that risk. So we agreed, and if we had our druthers, it would have been even more favorable than what we ended up with. But you're in mediation, developers are making a number of demands, and we were able to present a proposal that, okay, we'll zone up to 28 units an acre, an additional 2 units an acre, 30 units an acre, if you add some non-residential for the northern end of Kinder-Kamac. And we negotiated what we were willing to do. We settled with one developer, 445. This is the position we took with other developers, and we did our best to manage the risk so that developers didn't run over this town the way they do in every other builder's remedy lawsuit. And so that's the context within which we came up with all these ordinances and all these resolutions to try to protect the town from developers that have no interest but making money. We were doing our best to protect the town. So that's the context in which these ordinances arise. I will briefly describe each of the ordinances and leave to my colleagues the opportunity to go into further detail. 26-1 is a general ordinance that governs how the affordable housing is priced, how it's marketed, the bedroom distributions, how the deed restrictions are framed.
Jeff, can we do the explanation when we get to each ordinance?
Well, that's fine.
This way it's packaged ordinance by ordinance.
That's fine.
I appreciate the overview you provided. Next on the agenda is to consider the approval of Resolution 26-78, which is the resolution setting forth the reasons for adopting ordinances 2601, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06. This lays out the rationale. This is the only one I'm going to read, and I'm going to do that because there's a typo on page 2 that will be corrected this evening. Whereas on February 19, 2026, the governing body of the Borough of Oradell introduced ordinances 26-01, 26-02, 26-03, 26-04, 26-05, and 26-06, the ordinances which propose changes to the borough's zoning pursuant to the borough's housing element and fair share plan that was adopted on June 24, 2025. And a mediation and settlement process designed to address the borough's constitutional obligation to provide affordable housing. And whereas pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-26 and 40:55D-64, the ordinances were referred to the borough's planning board for review and recommendation. And whereas the planning board held a meeting on March 5th, 2026, which the board's planner, Caroline Reiter, attended, and whereas Ms. Reiter determined that ordinance numbers 26-01 and 26-06 were both consistent with the borough's master plan, and whereas Ms. Reiter determined that ordinance numbers 26-02, 26-03, 26-04, and 26-05 were consistent with the housing element of the master plan, but were not consistent with the land use element of the master plan. And whereas it was further determined that the planning board has been conducting a review of the master plan and will be updating the land use element to be consistent with the housing element, and whereas the planning board issued 2 resolutions memorializing these findings and determinations, and whereas the governing body has reviewed the aforementioned resolutions of the planning board, and despite the findings of inconsistency of certain ordinances, believes it is in the best interest of the borough to adopt all of the ordinances, specifically 26-01, 26-02, 26-03, 26-04, 26-05, and 26-06. And whereas pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-62A, the governing body desires to set forth its reasons for adopting the ordinances, notwithstanding the findings of the planning board. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the borough of Oradell, that's the typo, this says Closter, that the reasons for adopting all aforementioned ordinances are as follows. Number 1, ordinance numbers 26-01 and 26-06 are both consistent with the borough's master plan. Number 2, ordinance numbers 26-02, 26-03, 26-04, and 26-05 are consistent with the housing element of the master plan, but are not consistent with the land use element of the master plan. However, the planning board has been conducting a review of the master plan and will be updating the land use element to be consistent with the housing element. Number 3, the ordinances are consistent with the borough's housing element and fair share plan that was adopted on June 24, 2025, as amended on March 5, 2026, which implements the changes the borough agreed to take in mediation. Number 4, the ordinances must be adopted or the borough's ability to obtain Round 4 compliance certification from the court may be jeopardized. Now therefore be it further resolved that the borough clerk is authorized to record this resolution in the minutes of this meeting and to provide a copy of this resolution to the borough's planning board. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately upon adoption. So, having read that into the record, I will call for a motion to approve Resolution 26-78.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So next, we have the public hearing and adoption of each of the 6 ordinances.
Ordinance 26-1 is ready for final reading.
Will the borough clerk read ordinance number 26-1 by title only?
An ordinance to amend the Borough Code to include a new affordable housing and development fee ordinance.
Has ordinance number 26-1 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the general public?
Yes.
Is there any member of the general public who wishes to... All right, hold on. What happened to the explanatory statement section?
That's done on the introduction, but you can add it to this too.
All right. Before we get to the opening to the public, Jeff, here's your chance for 26-1 to do the explanatory statement.
All right. The Department of Community Affairs issued new regulations. They adopted them on November 6, 2025. They became available on December 15, 2025. And they established all the rules that towns need to follow in terms of how you price affordable housing, how you market affordable housing, the bedroom requirements for affordable housing, the form of deed restrictions for affordable housing. All the details of affordable housing are set forth in the regulations, and towns were given a very short window to adopt ordinances to try to implement those regulations. So what 26-1 is the ordinance that we need to adopt to set the ground rules for all the affordable housing that gets constructed pursuant to this plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance? The microphone is open for anybody that would like to comment on this specific ordinance.
Good evening, Carl Rizzo of Cole Schatz. I represent Pistilli Realty. A question on the regulations that you're referring to. Is there an affordable set-aside percentage that applies to all affordable housing in the town?
20%.
And that's across the board, regardless of which zone the property is in?
Yeah, one of the ordinances before this town tonight makes it 20%, a flat 20% across the board. In the past, some ordinances said 15% if it's rental, 20% of the number of units are for sale, and we were required over the course of mediation to have a flat 20% because we're a vacant land town. We don't have enough land to meet the quotas.
Does the ordinance 2601 identify any specific habitable area minimums that must be provided in any of these zones?
Are you asking me about the size of the unit?
Size of the unit.
Okay. The regulations refer to neighborhood preservation regulations, another entity that establish minimum size of the units.
Would that minimum size of unit be the same regardless of which zone you're in town here?
Yeah.
It's the same. Are there anything in this regulation that you're referring to, this new ordinance 2601, that specifically identifies the maximum percentage of residential dwelling space in any building?
It implements the new HMFA regulations that I refer to that reference and incorporate neighborhood preservation regulations, which establish minimum size of units. So yes, pursuant to this ordinance, there is a minimum size for the affordable units. If it's an inclusionary project where 80% of the units are sold at fair market value and 20% of the units are affordable, we're not talking about the 80%, we're only talking about the 20%.
Okay, so you're saying there's nothing that specifically in this 2601 ordinance that would identify a maximum percentage of a building that could be committed to residential use in a zone?
Percentage of it, I'm not following. No, the ordinance doesn't talk about how much of a building will be residential and how much of the building will be non-residential. It says that if there's going to be affordable units in a straight residential project or in a mixed-use project, here's the rules. You know, here's how you price those affordable units. Here's what the bedroom mix needs to be. Here's how they need to be marketed. Here's the deed. That's what the ordinance does.
Thank you. No further questions.
Anyone else from the public wish to be heard on ordinance 26-01? Hearing none, is any member?
Yeah, Paul Soon is 50 Beverly Road. Based on what was just said, I'm getting a little confused.
Paul, could you speak closer to the microphone?
Based on what I just heard now, I'm a little confused about this. The amount of, what he just said, the amount of...
residential to non-residential, he was talking.
Yeah, residential versus non-residential. How, I don't understand. How is that, is there a percentage on that at all? Or could it be all residential? Or could it be a little bit of residential and more commercial? Or what? How does that go?
Each ordinance is separate, each ordinance. If we're only talking, if we're going through this ordinance by ordinance, 26-1 doesn't speak to that. If we go to other ordinances do talk about how much residential and non-residential, and we try to create incentives in one of the other ordinances that we're not there yet to try to generate some non-residential development.
So on this particular ordinance, 26-1, there's nothing on that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
It's just here's the rules for affordable housing.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no further, is there any member of the council who wishes to discuss this ordinance further?
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance 26-1 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
We have a roll call, please?
I just need a second, sorry.
I'm sorry. We have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Excuse me, before the roll call, before the roll call, this is a very long ordinance. I would ask the municipal attorney, is it possible just to publish a summary of it? Because it's going to be expensive to publish all 47.
So I'll let the attorney discuss. I always thought the final was done by title only, but zoning might be different and like bonds. So if we be introduced by summary.
Laura, is your mic on?
Yes. Mr. Bailey's office produced a summary when we introduced, so we didn't have to
Right.
do it in full. I thought that finals were done by title, but if not, we can probably put a summary
I
together.
believe, let me verify that.
Okay.
You know, and I will by tomorrow
So if I
morning.
can make a recommendation, the motion does not speak to in full or partial, so
Right.
why don't we
Could you
just say
write
it's
down-
published in compliance with the law, and Mr. Bailey
Yeah.
will confirm that before that's done.
Yep.
Is that acceptable, Jeff?
That works, yeah.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Terror?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay.
Ordinance 26-2 is ready for final reading.
Will the Borough Clerk read ordinance number 26-2 by title only, please?
An ordinance to amend the Borough Code to include a new inclusionary zone district to block 716, lot 14 and 15 in the Borough of Oradell, Bergen County, New Jersey.
Has ordinance number 26-2 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the general public?
Yes.
Jeff, may we have an explanatory statement for this ordinance, please?
Yeah, I previously indicated that when we filed our plan in June, there were 5 objectors, 4 developers and Fair Share Housing Center. One of the objectors was 445 Kinderkamak LLC. And they came in wanting to put 40 units on that site. They were in our plan at 15 units. So we negotiated, we were able to get them from 40 down to 25. So this ordinance is pursuant to a settlement where we agreed to rezone them to try to manage the risk so they didn't try to shoehorn 40 units on that site. And just so to drive home the significance of a builder's remedy, if we didn't do that and they brought a builder's remedy lawsuit, they'd be in court saying, I want 40 units.
Or more.
Or more.
Or more.
Thank you. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance?
All right. Been waiting a long time to say this, a few hours, so thanks for your patience, everybody that's still here and everybody's still online. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Anthony Baccia. My family lives at the bottom of Oakley Place, directly behind 445 Kinderkamak Road.
Excuse me, I'm having a hard time hearing the gentleman. I heard you say.
Too close? All right, too
You said
close.
you and your family live at the
We
bottom.
live at the bottom of Oakley Place, directly behind 445 Kinderkamak Road. First, I want to acknowledge the difficult position the borough is in. The state's new affordable housing requirements have created a challenging process for municipalities, and I understand Oradell has been hit pretty hard by developers this past year. However, my comments tonight focus specifically on the proposed development of 445 Kinderkamak and the potential decision to extend the B1 zone and central business district north to Soldier Hill Road.
Anthony, can I just correct one thing? The last part is not part of the plan. That was proposed in June, and it's been removed.
Okay. Great. So, as far as this development is concerned, I'd like to discuss the planning decisions that will significantly impact our neighborhood. Oradell's 2018 Land Use and Central Business District Plan highlights goals of preserving residential character, maintaining appropriate density, and preventing incompatible land use arrangements. It also clearly identifies Orchard Street as the northern boundary of the CBD overlay. This might be redundant, I apologize, but this is part of my speech, so please bear with me. Now, extending the CBD north along, while it didn't happen, this site is taking on a similar look as if it did extend, for whatever reason, I don't understand. So this new overlay now, if you want to call it, for this specific site, even though it's not the new CBD, is allowing for a 3-story building with a 10-foot rear setback, the same setback the housing plan previously said was inadequate to buffer this neighborhood. So now why is the council backtracking on that now? And the scale of development at 3 stories with a minimum 10-foot rear setback is also inconsistent with the surrounding area. Aside from one 3-story office building across Kinderkamak, every single surrounding building is a 1 to 2.5-story building. There is, however, a nearby example of a more compatible approach. the senior housing development approved at 505-515 Kinnickermack. We all know it as the old AAA building. It's a 2.5-story building with sloped roofs, substantial rear setbacks of more than 50 feet, and a density of 16 units per acre. Yet, the current mediation agreement for 445 proposes a 3-story, 25-unit building at a density of 35 units per acre, more than double that recent nearby project. And importantly, this is a very large and intense development primarily to accommodate a very small number of affordable housing units. Out of the 25 units proposed, only about, I believe, 5 would be affordable housing, representing roughly 5% of the borough's overall affordable housing obligation with this 4th round of implementations. So now residents are being asked to accept a significant change to the scale and character of this neighborhood, a high-density, 3-story building directly behind single-family homes to satisfy only a small portion of the borough's requirements. Even more concerning, the proposal allows for an all-residential building rather than the mixed-use development required elsewhere, and it permits building coverage of over 50%, over 50, where the overlay in that area is only up to 40% normally. So my question is simple. Why is the development permitted to be more intense than what the original CBD overlay in that region allows, especially given the impacts on the homes behind it? I would like to show the council the view of my backyard where my kids play and the developing proposed site here behind my fence line. And if you flip it over, that will be my new view from my home. That's my fence line here. That's the rear of the new building that's proposed at 445. This is my backyard now. This is what it will look like. So as the borough moves forward with this process, I respectfully, and my family respectfully request several conditions to help minimize the impact of my home and the existing residential units surrounding it. First and foremost, do not include this unit and these areas in the CBD overlay, not just for this project, but for future projects as well. However, if you must include this, modify the zoning standards for the CBD currently between Orchard and Soldier Hill to better reflect the surrounding neighborhood. A 10-foot rear setback is not a sufficient buffer that have been there, homes that have been there for over a century, 1800s. Second, before site plans are finalized, the resident should have an opportunity to meet with the developer on site to discuss concerns and potential solutions. Third, stronger buffering requirements should be established, including preserving existing mature trees. I mean, you saw the trees in those photos. They're 200 some odd years old, 150 feet tall. Install substantial landscaping that provides immediate screening, and explore additional measures such as berms or raised planting areas to further impact site issues. Fourth, design considerations should be explored to protect privacy, such as limiting windows facing the rear properties. As you see, these windows will be looking at my daughter's playground. Finally, the building itself could step down towards the rear of the property with 2 stories instead of 3 to better transition to the residential neighborhood that lays behind it. These requests are not about stopping development or avoiding the borough's housing obligations. They are about ensuring that development is done thoughtfully and responsibly. Because when residents step back and look at this specific project, the concern becomes very simple. We are being asked to fundamentally change the character of our town for a massive and intrusive development project that only adds 5 affordable housing units. That balance deserves careful reconsideration. I beg you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anthony.
I would like to motion to put these into
Sure, you can provide them.
to provide us materials?
Yep. Thank you, Anthony.
Sam Tripsis, 327 Maple Avenue. In 2018, when the master plan was updated, fair share housing.
Sam, if you could imagine speaking to the very back of that stage, we'll understand you. Even though you have a mic, you've lowered your voice, and it's hard to hear you. Thank you.
In 2018, when we updated the master plan for fair share housing, it was not required to go past Orchard Street as 3 stories. And they said you could end at Orchard Street. So at what point did that change? That was round 3, and I don't recall ever seeing a document saying this changed, and even to extend it to Soldier Hill Road that I'm seeing. Can someone answer that? Because if we didn't go 3 stories, we might not be looking at this application right now.
I can tell you, and I invite the planners if they want to jump in, that in round 4, another obligation was heaped on the town, another 180 units, okay? So, and there's language in the legislation that Fair Share Housing Center interprets to say that 25% of that new obligation has to be realistic zoning. So the laws were changed to make what was already an onerous law even more onerous. And our choice was to address it as best we can or get denied and be subject to builder's remedies.
Okay, I understand that, but there was no discussion with the public, because if I heard that, I would have spoke against it, and I think many of us would. You're bordering a residential neighborhood, and I live, and I said this to the planning board the other night, I live on Maple Avenue, which abuts a commercial district. And with the master plan, we talked about protecting incompatible zoning with bigger buffers and less intense development. And that's why 2 stories would have made this, probably made this project not attainable for the developer. We would be looking at something that's more compatible. Now, you have 4 Queen Anne homes on that street, and then you have the historic site next to it. We thought we were safe with all the discussion. People spoke up. I mean, we filled the room, and when the planning board suggested all these changes, we pushed back, and we all thought, leaving, that we were safe, those structures would be safe. So yes, you need 180 units, but it didn't have to be there. You know, it's too close to our downtown. There's too many negatives here. When they talk about, when you go to the planning or zoning, it's a negative on the public good. I can't think of the phrase.
No substantial detriment to
Right.
public good. That's a
Yeah.
negative criteria, something different. That's
Right,
for
there you go. I've
variance
heard it a
group.
million times, but I went blank. So that's what I would see here. So, and I think once this gets developed, it's gonna jeopardize the other 2 Queen Anne's. It's gonna make them desirable to build the same kind of structure. So I don't think there's a win here for anyone. You know, especially if you live behind it. Your whole quality of life changes. And I fear for that for my own, for where I live. And for all, the rest of Kinderkamak Road that borders residential. So if there was a way to do some kind of land swap, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry that this developer thinks this is such a great thing. You know, if this is money is driving this, not for anyone else but the developer. So, thank you.
Jill Barbaries, 652 Orchard Street. 2 simple questions. Have any of you seen this letter that was sent out and the map? Okay. If you haven't, that means you're not within 200 feet of the development. But this map speaks volumes on how the recipients got this. Look at this map. Those residents within 200 feet, this is, in my opinion, disrespectful, inconsiderate. And I'm right there, as I spoke before. My second question is, all of you that are sitting there, there's no way in your heart that you can believe that this is good for our community and the character of Oradell. Please think twice about 445. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Kurtz. I live at 421 First Street. I understand that the borough must...
Can you repeat your address? I'm sorry.
421 First Street.
First Street?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I understand the borough must comply with affordable housing. My concern is not with compliance, but how the borough is choosing to comply and the specific sites being selected. The properties at 441 and 445 Kinderkamack Road occupy a highly visible and historic significant location in the center of our community. This area sits directly next to preserved historic structures, including the Van Buskirk Oakley House, which contributes to the character of downtown Oradell. Redevelopment at the scale of 25 units of this parcel appears inconsistent with the historic and architectural context of this corridor. The 19th century horse barn at 445 Kinderkamack was recently restored after decades of deterioration. Its restoration showed that adaptive reuse is possible and valuable in this town. Before approving redevelopment that could result in its demolition, the borough should carefully consider preservation and adaptive reuse options, similar to the successful examples next door at Fenner and Essler. Residents deserve to understand how this site was selected and whether alternative locations were evaluated. There are other areas in the town with larger commercial buildings and vacant properties where redevelopment could occur and is going to occur that's far less impact on the historical structures and established neighborhoods. When the development concepts already exist for a site, the public should have full transparency about how those plans influence zoning decisions. When elected officials are professionally involved in the real estate transactions connected to redevelopment sites, even if legally permissible, it can be raised as a concern to the public and the confidence and transparency. Residents simply want to know that decisions affecting the future of our downtown are being made solely in the best interest of the community. Many residents move to Oradell because of its small town character, historic architecture, and scale of development. Redevelopment that replaces historic or smaller structures with larger, dense projects risks permanently altering the character of Kinderkamack Road. I urge the council to carefully reconsider whether this particular site is the most appropriate location for development at this scale. Compliance with state housing obligations should still be achieved in a way that respects historical preservation, transparency, and the long character of our community. And a side note, like, I appreciate that Roger recuses himself, but it makes me feel really disheartened to know that he was directly involved in the purchasing of this property, and he was the buyer's agent, knowing that it was going to be developed the way that it was going to be developed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, as soon as, I want to speak up to the 15-foot minimum amount of yard buffer zone between commercial and residential. That should be at least 15. Now, if the building is higher, if it's 4 stories, I'm not sure if this is a 4-story building or a 3-story building, but if it's a 4-story building, 15 feet is not enough. It should be higher. And somebody should figure out how much higher based on the height. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, on this particular ordinance, how much of it is considered where you could put commercial, and how much could you consider putting residential there? You said there's a certain amount.
This is going to, this property is going to be 100% residential.
100% residential?
Yes.
And it's on Kinderkamack Road?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to comment on 26-2?
Carl Rizzo of the law firm Cole Schatz on behalf of Pistilli Realty. Question on this particular ordinance. I understand that it allows for a 3-story building. It allows for 50% building coverage. And it allows for all residential development, no requirement for mixed use. Is that correct? Yes. What impervious coverage amount is allowed as a maximum on this particular property? Thank you. And the maximum building coverage is 50%, is that correct?
Slightly over, it's 50.5.
That's all I have, thank you.
I'm not sure what the policy is on.
Generally, it's one turn, but I'll grant you an exception.
I'm going to speak for my wife because she gets 5 minutes too, right?
We can do that.
I understand we're talking here about historical significance and impacts to the community. And you're taking 2 single-family homes, or one's a multifamily, let's call it what it is, and turning them into 25 units, right? And you're getting 5, maybe 5, 6 affordable housing units out of it? 5, thank you. But I think you get 1 bonus or something, right? Because you're not using it for commercial. I forget.
You get a bonus.
Yes, thank you. So 5 or 6 units, whatever you want to call it. But now down the pike, you guys are seeing something developing down at those office spaces where you have the potential to do 20% of 2,000 units, right?
20% of whatever number of units.
Whatever number that might be.
It's certainly not 2,000. I don't want to put that, I don't want
Okay, I don't want to put that out there.
It's 20% of a larger number.
Can you reallocate and defer these 5 with the understanding that you can push them off towards a potential larger scale site?
I think what you need to understand is, we didn't pick this site. A developer came in, filed an objection.
But you're changing the zoning to accommodate development on the site as a town, as a whole. So you don't say they chose it.
No,
They
let me
came to
be
you-
clear, let me be clear.
Okay.
We didn't say, how are we going to comply? 445. That's not how it went down. How it went down is we filed our plan, and the owner of that site, the contract purchaser of that site, filed an objection and said, I think the site is appropriate for 40 units. We said, you're out of your mind. We don't think it's appropriate for 40 units, and we tried to bring it down as low as we could. That's how this thing unfolded. It wasn't as if the town said, all right, that's where we want it. We had to deal with an objection, and we're in mediation, and we had a judge and an adjudicator that all had their opinions of what needed to be done.
For this specific site?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it is, 2 units.
I think that's a very important point, and I'm pretty certain that you actually led with that. This is one of the 5 challenges that the borough's plan received. This is part of the process established by the new legislation. It allows for interested parties to challenge within a certain time period, as it did.
But if the town isn't zoned to allow that type of development on those sites, how does it become allowable?
What every builder's remedy suit is, what every affordable housing plan is a change to what the town would otherwise have for that site. This site was zoned a certain way before today. That's what this town thought was appropriate for that site.
Correct.
But in the context of this process, we can't just say, we're not going to do anything. We have to deal with 5 objections. We have to deal with a judge that has his opinion. We have to deal with
I
an
understand,
adjudicator that has
all
their
of that, but
opinion.
as we sit here tonight, you council members will vote yea or nay to approve this ordinance. So what is the point of voting then?
Point of voting is to approve it or not.
But so if you say we don't approve it,
Then if we don't approve it, we don't get immunity, and you could have 40-plus units on that site.
A minimum of 4.
Andy, I would not have any of this stuff impact the town, quite frankly.
I understand that, and I know you're in a tough
And
position.
I really sympathize with everybody who's affected by this, much as I would hope somebody would sympathize with me if I were closer to one of these sites. I sit here with no great pride presiding over this process to allow them to come in and alter the character of the town. In certain respects, when it's concentrated on the north end of town, that's a little bit more manageable because of the landscape in which that sits in versus your situation. Yours is the most drastic. And quite frankly, I think what Jeff is trying to say is when a property owner comes to the borough and says, hey, a developer, I'm going to retract from property, a developer who speculated and bought property, perhaps in advance of knowing that this law was being implemented, and say,
They bought it the month after the law was implemented,
okay, so
with the realtor who sits on the board.
not to say that the developer didn't pursue an opportunity, I can't speak on their behalf.
Sure.
But say, I can now use this mechanism against the town to get something I want here. And unfortunately, that's the reality which we're dealt. And to Jeff's point, you know, we went in, we said, well, we don't want to see anything here. But if you have to force our hand, we think 15 units is what should be here. And they countered with something much higher. And again, we just said, you're out of your mind. There's no way that we can sign off on that. So the 25 is where it ended up through the mediation process with the judge and the adjudicator.
So can I be point blank and ask, is that it for 445? Is it a done deal with the 10-foot setback and 50.5% coverage?
The town has a choice. You can say no.
No, I'm not asking that question.
Jeff, I want to answer his specific question. So I believe while the zoning calls for one thing, the settlement agreement we reached, we did negotiate a larger setback in the rear, which I believe is 20 feet, because we worked to eliminate 2 parking spaces, because we are concerned about the buffers.
I did see that in the plans, 45
And I
to
think that
43.
we do have the ability, because there's a combined side yard setback where the building could shift to one side versus the other to maintain a combined setback, but the minimum is 10 feet. So I think, Karen, is that right? We have 10 and 15?
That's correct, is that it has to be 25 total,
Right,
no less
combined.
than 10.
So where that building sits on the property could be adjusted
My
through
side's
the
got the 10,
application
yeah.
process. But, you know, these are the cards we're dealt. And I don't mean to sound like we had no choice and we couldn't do anything, but our options were severely limited.
All right, thank you.
I also, I mean, to the mayor's point, Mayor, you brought up the increased setback to the rear because of the removal of the 2 parking spaces. And the parking, the setback is to the parking with the building being set back even a little bit farther.
Right.
Than
So
that.
that's-
Does that make sense?
It makes
What I
sense,
just
but I
said?
don't understand how a unit that was approved 2 years ago at the AAA building has 60-foot setbacks to the building, 60. And we're here squabbling over 15 versus 20 in a matter of 2 years.
I mean, the failure to act on something
It's a
puts
failure.
the entire
It's
town
a failure.
at risk.
It's a failure. It's a complete failure.
May I speak?
Briefly.
Briefly, I've spent 30 years trying to preserve the historic structures of this town. I fought for 10 years to try to get an historic commission whose job would have been to notice those 1,800 houses and protect them. We were not supported by the town, and now we're here. And going forward, may I suggest that we could reconsider the importance of historic preservation, because that would have been one of the ways to preserve those 2 sites. And there are plans to deal, I understand, with the historic barn or
It's the barn.
yeah.
Yes.
But at any rate, I just want to drop that into people's heads, because when people came out screaming, no, we don't want an historic commission, here we are, folks, and that would have been one of your answers. I sympathize with what you're saying, as does the mayor, as does everyone
I know
on this
I know you do.
council.
I
We
don't
are
doubt
like
that
in
for
a
a second.
pincer situation. The alternative is to say no, as he has suggested, and a builder comes in and says, I'm doing a 6-foot apartment, 6-story apartment building there, and you can't stop me. And we wouldn't be able to stop them, which is why everyone's been working so hard to try to prevent the worst.
It's just unfortunate that there's like 1 or 2 houses that are being immediately impacted by this.
Agreed. I did note all the points that you raised, and if you can share them with me outside of this.
Yeah, would love to.
I'd love to follow up and
Sure.
see how many of them we can try to make better on.
Okay.
I mean, the agreement's an agreement in terms of the settlement, but I don't think some of the things that you suggested are unreasonable that we couldn't perhaps have a discussion
That'd be great.
with the
Thank
property
you.
owner about.
Thank you.
I represent the lot next to that gentleman, and have probably the same effect as those photos represent, which I didn't see till tonight.
John, would you mention your name?
I'm John Horstman. I live in Oradell. I represent Arthur Malin, who's the owner of 657 Oakley. And my thought is there no way to have the developer have to put something in escrow for the lots being affected to represent the loss in value of those properties? Could be put in escrow, gains interest. If there's no impact on these lots, then he gets the money back with that interest. Otherwise, it goes to the owners of that lot. Just a thought.
The law doesn't permit that. If the project generates a need for off-site improvement,
I'm not talking about taxes.
I'm just telling you what's lawful and what's not. It is not lawful to say, my property's diminished in value, pay. There's no law that I'm aware of, I don't know if Bill is aware of it, that would allow any municipality to do that. The only law that I am aware of.
It's not the municipality. It would be something that would be for those particular lots being affected.
I understand. The question on the table is, can we make a developer escrow money to account for a diminishment in value of an adjacent property, correct? That's your issue?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. The answer is no. There's not a lawful way to do that. There is a lawful way for a town that if a developer is going to have an off-site impact, that you can make the developer pay for that. And like the developer's going to have to bring his sewer and water lines in and things of that nature. But what you're saying, there's no law that permits it that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Eileen Jones, Grant Ave. I'm not here to make myself popular or make people happy with what I say, but yes, I like historic homes, historic housing, but assigning a home as an historic house is not going to stop affordable housing from coming into our town and building what they want to build and where they want to build it. And I just want to say, it's who you vote for that's going to hold or stop affordable housing. And that's what's so important. So when you cast your vote for somebody or something, just be careful what you're voting for, because it could turn out to be a very undesirable thing for people personally. I'm not talking to the council, I'm talking to everyone, but I was told to speak to the council. Excuse me?
You're referring to the New Jersey legislature, and you're absolutely right.
Yes.
It is the New Jersey legislature that can make changes. And they're the ones that adopted this legislation that is the hand that's been dealt to this town.
So the next time we go to vote, let's really look into who's running for what and vote the way you want to see things be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Robin Mortman, formerly Kelly, on Beverly Road, 114. So I might be naive to this, so I just have a question, kind of going to the other side of town, 445. But when we did some work to our house 25 years ago, we were told we couldn't raise the house, we couldn't put an addition on, the streamline of the houses all have to remain the same. So when I look at 445, right? I want to make sure I have the right one. 445, and I look at the street view, it's a wider distance between the homes, but why would we have the town approve it to go higher and change that view? You know, why can it be done, it can't be done on one side of the town, but it can be done on the other? And or even on Kinderkamak, you know, behind my house is the condos, and then all the other homes and residents that are, or businesses that we're talking about as well. Like, how can we go much higher that you're talking about in some places, I don't know, 3 stories?
Yeah.
So that's my question.
Look, it's one thing for a municipality to decide how to plan and zone its town, okay? It's another thing entirely when you're in this process and there's 5 objectors and these developers are making demands, and you have a very substantial obligation. For round 4 alone, forgetting about rounds 1 through 3, it's 180. So that's a big number. And so that all came from this legislation that puts enormous pressure on the town to try to address it, and it gives the developers leverage to push the town in areas that they would not otherwise go, but that their backs are against a wall because this bullet is being fired at them.
Does that give the opportunity for me and 2 of my neighbors to sell my house to a realtor and say, oh, we're going to put on Beverly Road a big building? Like, that's what it feels like it's allowing.
I'm not following your question.
So my question is, for whomever sold this house or bought this house with this project in mind, could I sell my house and say, you know, you put up whatever you want? Like, could they do a tear down and build the new building? I mean, I know that's like in the extreme, but it's almost what it feels like that it's being allowed.
Jeff, if I could. So if a land prospector wanted to come in and buy your house and 2 lots to the left and 1 lot to the right and assume 4 lots, we could be in the same situation that we're speaking about with 445, in which they say, I've assembled enough land mass to put up a financially feasible development that I'm going to be a nice guy and help you, town of Oradell, with your affordable housing obligation. That is the last scenario we want. I don't like the scenario of 445 as it is.
Right.
For that to land smack in the middle of a residential, solely residential neighborhood is just utterly disastrous.
Exactly.
But getting the immunity and having our plan certified, you know, while, yes, we're having to have some things, pardon the expression, shoved down our throat that we don't like, it stops other things from happening. And we retain our immunity that we've held up until this point for another 10-year period. And you know what? Maybe we need to be on guard thinking about what is it round 5 is going to bring that we need to proactively try and guard against. But even zoning something a certain way is not a certainty that somebody can't come back later and say, well, I want to do something different. I want to rezone it. The 3 lots on Kinderkamak Road at the north end are zoned for business, big box business with parking lots. That's the zone. But yet the law allows a property owner to come in and say, hey, I'm going to help you meet this obligation.
Right.
You know, if we didn't have an obligation to meet, then this would kind of be a moot point. We wouldn't even be having these discussions. But it's an imperfect process. It honestly is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on 26-2?
Ori Katzin, 192 Laurel. I hear the concern of the young couple that is here, that their property is being affected. It's good to see that people come in here, young people come in and want to get into this town, invest their hard-earned money into here, and now they're facing issues like that, which they never thought would come upon us. And I also hear the Maggie, that you push the historic aspect of it, and another person spoke about the historic. It's very important. And Mayor, I want to say that I really appreciate all your effort. I know how much you fight to have the town remains as is and not change its image, its look, its type of population, or create more traffic or more even business and activities that is not desired by the people of Oradell. I just want to know if there's a way, if we are forced to have these properties assigned with the 15 units, and the plan for the building is not yet final, is there a way to make it, the design of the outside of the building at least fits the rest of Kinderkamak Road, matches? This is something to work with, obviously, design firm, architects, historical, either committee or someone even like Sam that is so much involved, and I enjoy to see his work. Something that will at least, if we are forced to get it upon us, make it look like the rest of the of Oradell. So when you drive around town, you don't have an eyesore like the photo that was displayed upon us. Something like that in case the plan is not yet done.
We can certainly make those requests.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else care to be heard on 26-2?
Just one question. Why weren't the neighbors notified at the beginning of this combination of 441 and 445? Why did we only find out about this the last couple of months?
Jeff, can you just explain the mediation process?
The mediation process is a confidential process. No one in mediation is allowed to be talking about what's happening in mediation. So it's the nature of the way it is. And then the statute creates these compressed deadlines where, you know, you haven't, like December 31st, the program judge is supposed to make a recommendation. So, you know,
So we couldn't get our own attorney to help fight it as private citizens in the surrounding homes? Why couldn't we get I would have gotten more than just you guys. I would have paid. My house would go down $150,000 probably overnight. I would have paid money, throwing money at this. But we're not being told that the plan comes out a few months ago? 2 months ago, it's a done deal. Why wasn't that allowed to us instead of a shit Xerox that got sent out for $10? Why? Why were we not told, team up, fight this, be a community, rally?
Well, look, again, the town can say, I'm not going to rezone, and now we're in the...
I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that.
Anthony, the mediation process by the judge's rule would not allow for it to be discussed at a mediation.
Is that because it's affordable housing or just...
No, it's just mediation process, a legal mechanism. I mean, Jeff, you can speak to it greater than I,
Mediation
but
is confidential.
445, the lot was not big enough because it wasn't 32,000 feet. It was because they bought also 441 and combined the lots, and that's how they had the requirement of 32,000 feet, correct?
I would assume.
Okay, thank you.
Hi again. If we are able to put in requests, one of the lawyers was very kind to share the layout of the house on 445, the apartment building. And the entire first level is a lobby, which I find very unnecessary. If we're able to say that it can just be residential, even the apartments on the other side that are just brick, much more unassuming, much more timeless than this. So if we could just try to
We can always
minimize it.
ask. We were not in a position to dictate the design of the building. I can pretty much envision the answer would be given at the onset, but we can always make requests. There's just no guarantee that
Okay.
the property owner is going to honor them.
I figure just the least amount of
Yep.
wasted space would be
Understood.
amazing. Okay,
Thank you very much. Anyone else care to be heard on 26-2? Is any member of the council, sorry, I'm losing my papers. Any member of the council wish to discuss this ordinance further?
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance 26-2 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare?
Abstain.
I don't know if we can we?
Am I the fourth? I'm going to change my vote, and the reason I'm changing it is I don't want a developer coming in and putting in 6- and 8-story buildings, and that's what we open ourselves up to. And I don't think you all totally understand that pressure. My heart is with what a lot of you have said. I agree.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ordinance 26-3 is ready for final reading.
Will the Borough Clerk read ordinance number 26-3 by title only?
An ordinance to amend the Borough Code to include a new inclusionary zone district for 66 Kinderkamack Road, Block 113, Lot 5, in the Borough of Oradell, Bergen County, New Jersey.
Has ordinance number 26-3 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the general public?
Yes.
Jeff, can we have an explanatory statement for this ordinance, please?
Yeah. This site is the old Subaru site. It was the subject of an application for a use variance to the zoning board that was denied. They made a second application, it was denied. And when we were in the mediation process, the adjudicator, and we had it in our plan as an overlay site. So it was going to be, it could be developed with the underlying zoning, or it could be developed as an inclusionary use. And the adjudicator said that we need to, there's going to be an obligation associated with it because it's a vacant site. And so the adjudicator recommended that instead of having it in the plan as an overlay zone where you could have a choice of developing with the underlying zoning or develop with the standards in the overlay zone with the inclusionary development, she said we would need to remove the right to develop with the underlying zoning in order to gain her favorable recommendation. So that's what we did. It wasn't a big stretch from what we had already put in the plan.
Thank you. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance?
Good evening again. Carl Rizzo of the law firm Cole Schatz on behalf of Pistilli Realty of 66 Kinderkamack. In the first instance, I verified, I believe, with the town that my client, who is the owner of the only property affected by this ordinance, did not receive notice. And therefore, this body lacks jurisdiction to hear this and consider it this evening. and we ask that you withdraw it and reschedule it so that my client has the opportunity, the fair opportunity, to retain professionals to properly address what's being proposed tonight. My client is out of state in Florida and only found out this tangentially, was able to get a hold of me to appear this evening, but I've only been able to review it briefly. We certainly had no opportunity to retain a professional planner or engineer to understand fully what is permitted on this lot as proposed and what was previously allowed. We do know from hearing tonight your own resolution that introduced all these ordinances that this particular ordinance does not comply and is not consistent with the land use plan of your master plan. The law is very clear that where you adopt a zoning that adversely impacts one parcel, that's known as illegal reverse spot zoning. In particular, I refer you to some authorities in New Jersey and beyond. In the case of Petin Associates, Inc. versus Township of Dover, 64 NJ 327, 1974 case, the Supreme Court of New Jersey recognized that this is illegal and rejected the efforts to zone a property to the disadvantage of one particular property owner. In that case, zoning designation to the particular parcel was both out of character with the surrounding area and designated for a part of the town from which the affected parcel was significantly separated. Again, your own memo recognizes that this particular proposed ordinance is inconsistent with the zone plan of the master plan. Therefore, I think it fits squarely within, and again, it only affects my client's property. My client's property has been singled out, and it's being treated differently than neighboring properties. It's certainly being treated differently than your earlier adopted ordinance, where you indicated that 2602, I believe, where you're allowing 3-story buildings. In this proposed ordinance, you're only allowing 2. In 2602, you are allowing complete residential development, exclusively residential development. In this proposed ordinance, you're forcing my client to only be able to build a mixed-use development with retail, commercial on the first floor, and residential, including affordable housing, on the second floor. That's very different than the other ordinance you adopted tonight. And the ordinances, the other ordinance 26-4, which relates to the properties immediately surrounding my client's property, has very different treatment. And also the one that I just mentioned, 2602, that was just adopted, you have, you allow 50% building coverage, where here you're proposing only 40% building coverage. So again, you're treating my client's property uniquely and differently than other properties, including properties that are in the affordable housing zones and overlay district. And we entirely object to that. If there's going to be treatment, it should be fair across the board. As your counsel has indicated, there is a set aside across the board for 20%. But now you're allowing taller buildings in one location and shorter buildings on my client's property. You're allowing less building coverage on my client's property. You also are requiring a minimum of 600 habitable square feet of dwelling units. That would be the smallest size, and that restriction does not appear in the other zones. You also, let's see what else there was. There's one other thing, I believe. You also impose, in this proposed ordinance, you're imposing a maximum of 2/3 of the building can be committed to residential use. And that specific restriction does not appear to apply to any of these other zones. Again, treating my client's property to its disadvantage uniquely to that property. And we object to that. So in the first instance, we don't think you should be considering this tonight. I understand you're in this unfortunate situation where you have a time deadline, but that doesn't excuse you from complying with the law. You're trying to comply with the law in that instance, but you have to comply with the law in the first instance to my client and provide proper notice. That hasn't been done. I think that can be acknowledged by your counsel and by your clerk, and I implore you not to proceed with this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I be heard about these legal claims? There's case law that maybe you're not familiar with, that when a site is part of a housing element of a master plan, it's not spot zoning. It's a Skillman case. I believe there's also a Supreme Court case on that. And there's also law on constructive notice that you obviously knew about this meeting, you came and you've been heard. So I do think you can act on it, which is not to say that we can't subsequently have a conversation about this, but I think you can act on this ordinance.
If I could just add one thing,
Please.
Mayor. With respect to the notice issue, there's a Supreme Court decision, a state Supreme Court decision, Northgate Condominium versus the Hillsdale Planning Board, where the issue raised, challenged the board's approval of an application in that case was that the notice was deficient because it had gone to the wrong lot and block. The court in that case, and it was upheld by the trial level appellate division and the Supreme Court, was that there was effectively constructive notice, if not actual notice, in that the objector was aware of the hearings. So I believe despite any issue presented, we're okay on the notice issue. And again, we have time constraints that we need to comply with.
Okay.
I would only like to say that the statute is very clear. The notice has to be 10 days, and my client did not have 10 days' notice, and that's what's required, and there's no exception to that.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the public wish to be heard on 26-3?
Well, so what's going on here? I was going to ask the question of how much we could have commercial and how much we can have residential. And this gentleman here now brought up all this other stuff here. Where do we stand?
So this zone district mimics the CBD overlay, and the stipulations or the requirements that Mr. Rizzo read are all from the CBD overlay, the minimum lot size, the 2/3, et cetera. The way that this ordinance is written is first floor, any permitted use in the B1 zone. That's a non-residential use. Second floor, multifamily dwelling with a 20% affordable set aside.
So if somebody wanted to come in and do something else, say somebody wanted to make it a bank, would that be allowed?
No, not without a use variance.
Okay. I don't know how, I don't know what he's saying, I'm just wondering how much of it is true and how much of it is his wishes for his client. I guess we don't have an answer, and if that person didn't get the notice, does that mean we can't pass this tonight?
The opinion that I expressed is that there's constructive notice, we can act on it. If the attorney wants to file a lawsuit about that, anyone can sue anyone for anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else to be heard on 26-3?
Beth Schuler, 77 Beverly Road. First of all, I want to thank you for all your work you're doing, and, I understand a lot more now. I mean, when I got all these letters, I didn't know what was going on, so I appreciate your explanations. Originally, as we know, that property, they had different proposals, and that was during the pandemic, so it was all virtual, and I don't think as many people were paying attention what they wanted to do. The main concerns were about, it's a small little neighborhood, a lot of children, a lot of families were in these old homes, as some of our neighbors already expressed. But my main concern is traffic, so before they said they would be a way so that if there, I don't even know, as the mayor explained, there's no proposals yet. But so I'm looking ahead when there will be a proposal for the development. Would there be a way to prevent any traffic from coming down from Argyle Street or Berkshire Street down to Beverly Road? And because it's a very small little neighborhood, a lot of families, and we want to make sure that nobody would that any of the residents living in these units wouldn't try to cut through and go through Beverly Road to avoid trying to make that turn, because trying to make that turn, a left-hand turn or a right, it's very busy on Kinderkamak over there. So that's one of my main concerns. And that's really, I know that's going to probably be more when there's a plan, there's a proposal, but I'd like to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Anyone else from the public like to be heard on 26-3?
One more thing, I just thought of this. At the other meeting that I brought this up about that legislation, the 5350. Did you look into that at all?
Yeah, Carolyn did. It hasn't been enacted yet. I think it's just proposed.
Oh, well, when I went online, it said it was signed by Governor Murphy.
So, yeah, I looked into it as well, and from what I was able to garner, it is not a bill, it's not law, it's just proposed legislation, but it hasn't been signed into law yet.
Wow.
It's an assembly bill, what you provided us with.
Well,
And again, going back to Jeff's initial comment, that this was all discussed, of course, with the special adjudicator as well, who is the court's expert on this matter. So
Oh, you discussed this with the adjudicator?
I believe much of this discussion initiated from her, yes, as Jeff indicated.
Yeah.
Okay, because when I went online, it said that Governor Murphy signed it.
I didn't discuss this.
I don't know.
We didn't discuss the legislation. I never heard of this legislation. I've been living, breathing Mount Laurel for 40 years, okay? And then when you mentioned it, it was a surprise. So I said, maybe I missed it. And so we looked in, so Fran and Carolyn looked into it. It was not law, it was not signed into law.
I punched in on the internet, 5350, and it said that it was signed by Governor Murphy. I'm sorry, I'm not lying, I tell you.
I don't think you're lying. I'm not accusing you of lying, but I am saying that my colleagues looked into it and because I asked this.
Maybe you can look into it a little bit deeper, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
There's no one else from the public that wishes to be heard further on 26-3. Is there any member of the council who wishes to discuss this ordinance further?
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance.
Before you do that, just pending the advice of legal counsel, the borough attorney and our affordable housing attorney, they have stated that they believe we have legal standing to act on this. So, Tom.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that ordinance 26-3 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote?
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to say that whatever conversations may need to happen after this, if they can be facilitated to address any of the issues that were raised by the Property Owners Council.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance 26-4 is ready for final reading.
Will the Borough Clerk read ordinance number 26-4 by title only?
An ordinance to amend sections 240-6.2, 246.5, 246.6, and 240-11.1 of the code, of the Borough Code.
Has ordinance number 26-4 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the general public?
Yes.
Jeff, may we have an explanatory statement on this, please?
Yeah. When we filed the plan in June of 2025, we had a significant unmet need for round 4 because we were assigned a number of 180 for round 4, and our position was we only had enough land for 3. And so we had to propose something to address what we considered to be that 177 unmet need. So we proposed what was in effect an expansion of the existing overlay. Carolyn can describe it more accurately, but the effect of the ordinance, of what we were proposing, was to expand the existing overlay zone to what had been approved in round 3. And so we went in with that, and as a result of discussions that took place over the course of mediation, we were able to pull that back somewhat. So what we ended up with was this overlay zone that's 26-4.
Thank you. Do you want, Mr. Mayor, do you want any further description, or is that sufficient?
I think that's sufficient unless a question comes up that you can address from public comment. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance? 26-4.
I can.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Why don't you just give a quick overview?
Sure. So what is happening with respect to this ordinance is what is currently the B3 zone, with the exception of 66 Kinderkamak, is going to become the B1 zone. The B1 zone carries with it the CBD overlay. The CBD, Central Business District, or CBD, that is the borough's court-approved from round 3 overlay that allows for mixed use with an affordable component. So that's what is happening, is the B3 zone is becoming B1, and then the CBD overlay carries with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's the south end of Oradell.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's in the surrounding areas.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the last part was. It's really hard to hear up here.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought you had a
Okay.
question.
Anybody from the public wish to be heard on this ordinance?
Hi, again, I am Poonam Nagpal at 70 Elliott Court, right across Subaru lot. So,
Would you please imagine that there's a small deaf lady at the back of the stage and you have to really speak loudly so she can hear you? Thank you.
sure, I can go louder. So, the thing is, my question is, I heard for ordinance, 2026-2, you have some plans, right? For this, like, I think you were mentioning that there are a number of units that you are able to build on that. You were able to reduce from certain number to like 25 or something?
We were able to pull.
Across the behind 445.
We were, as to this ordinance that we're talking about now, the June 2025 plan had more land that was subject to the overlay than what is in this overlay now. It's somewhat lesser.
Okay.
Same standard, just impacts a smaller area.
Okay, so I think Mayor mentioned earlier that he doesn't have any developer yet, right?
Correct.
So may I understand what is the bandwidth for change? Let's say you are proposing something and it is going to pass anyways, it seems like that. So what is the bandwidth for a change? Let's say you pass and then developer comes, and are you abide by that, or like?
The benefit for this change is that we're employing an already proven mechanism to provide opportunity to have residential above commercial, one story, on the east side of the street, which is where the majority of this extension is. That was done throughout the entire central Kindercomack corridor to get an objector in round 3, the Fair Share Housing Center, to understand that we had a realistic mechanism that if a property owner wanted to redevelop their lot, that there could be affordable housing included as part of that redevelopment. And as you can see from the past 10 years of round 3, it's not really materialized because, again, a lot of these lots are smaller and would need to be acquired in aggregate in order to do something. So what we're trying to do is to be able to take some of that treatment a little further south to the B3 zone to tell the court that, we wanted to take this existing mechanism we had previously employed in round 3 and apply it here as part of round 4 to help meet the need, which, we don't really have a way of meeting at 173 units or 180 units of affordable housing. So we had to show every opportunity possible that we were making an effort to attempt to comply with the number that we were saddled with.
But as such, we don't have any number of units that will be built there or something?
No, there's no proposals to do anything here currently.
Okay, but yeah, I was trying to understand what is the bandwidth, how far the developer can go. Do you have certain regulations, beyond which they cannot go, or
Yes,
something?
the regulations in our zoning code that discuss the B1 and central business district overlay, those detail the zoning requirements for which the property can be developed.
Are property owners shared, those regulations, so we can see and
They're all on our borough website.
Okay.
They're on also eCode is a website. It's e-code where you can find many municipal zoning ordinances, including Oradell's. So.
You can get to it from our website,
Are you
to
also,
the eCode.
there's also a link from the borough website.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate, you are providing Oradell community certain kind of immunity, basically to, prevent this overdevelopment of what is required. And may I request to build more green zone, behind our property, because that will shield, that will shield from being affected for the privacy issue. It's written in the ordinance, basically.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Hello again, Christiane, 86 Elliott. So with 26-4 and that one going down from B3 to B1, I understand that it's going to be smaller commercial units possible, right, compared to?
No, I think.
Not smaller units, a smaller area that's going to have the benefit of this zoning.
Okay, so.
What was in the June 2025 plan?
Okay, so I guess there has been a lot that has happened in the
Yes.
past 3 hours. So with the 177 unmet housing that we still have to figure out how to meet, how?
No, you don't.
We don't, okay.
You have to make a good faith effort. So this was part of our good faith effort.
Oh, thank God.
I don't think there's a universe where this town could ever come up with that many units. And throughout the state, there are many towns that have an adjustment and have a huge unmet need, and they can't do it. One of the issues in mediation was Fair Share Housing Center took the position that you have to provide for the whole thing. And we said, no, you don't. And we cited contrary law. We cited all the examples of all the settlements they reached where they never required all of it to be done. And we were able to win that fight. And so the issue became, are you making an appropriate effort to address the unmet need? And the judge ultimately recognized
Okay, well, that's, well, it's a relief to hear that we don't have to meet all 177 units. So I guess for, since my property is right on Elliott, then down to McKay or Reese, making a left going to Kinderkamak is already a challenge. Can we please make an effort to, I guess, make it more safe for residents and the high schoolers to, you know, like cross the street? I don't know if the traffic light, that way I don't have to always hold my breath when I'm driving my 3 kids to school. Please, if we could do that.
Yep. Pedestrian safety is something we've been continually investigating for over the last year and a half, with lighting and other treatments that would make it a safer environment for pedestrians. Some coordination is required with the county, as it is a county road, but anything that's going to happen in this corridor is going to require traffic studies and the like. So nothing will be done here that does not have adequate review.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Carl Rizzo of Coleshots again, on behalf of Pistilli Realty. I believe it was Caroline Ryder. You indicated that this particular ordinance converts the B3 into the B1 and follows the CBD overlay. And you indicated that it accepts out my client's property. And first of all, why is my client's property not being treated like the properties immediately adjacent to it, 1? And 2, how is that different treatment manifest in the possibilities for development?
So first of all, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah, so first of all, as was indicated when there was discussion of rezoning of 66 Kinderkamak, that it was, that this 66 Kinderkamak, the recommendation from working with the adjudicator was to just adopt the overlay zone as the permitted use for that site, which is what was done.
But how is that different than the properties immediately adjacent to it that are now in the B1 zone?
Because they won't have, the B1 uses would not be permitted. It is only, let me rephrase, it then is only for 66 Kinderkamak, the only permitted use is that which is the overlay for the properties being rezoned as B1.
I'm sorry, if you could help me out. I have to try to report back to my client and understand what it is you're doing here, okay? You've made it clear that my client's property is being treated differently. It's in a different zone than the properties immediately adjacent to it. And I'm trying to understand what that difference is. Can you help me?
I think I answered, okay.
Between a property being used to address the unmet need and property being used to address an adjusted number. If you're using property to address an adjusted number, the only permitted use can be this inclusionary use. If you're using a property to address the unmet need, it can be an overlay, which preserves the owner's right to develop with the underlying zoning and gives them an option. That's the difference between an overlay zone that addresses the unmet need and an ordinance that creates an opportunity for affordable housing to address the adjusted number.
And is it what you're indicating is my client's property is to address the adjusted number,
Yes.
not the unmet need?
Yes. That's a position the adjudicator took, and the adjudicator said, and here's the solution. And we followed the adjudicator's suggestion.
Thank you.
Joanne Bunicor, Beverly Road, 82. I just have a question. Can you explain to me, when you're talking about Meyerhoff and Berkshire. On Meyerhoff, aren't there residential houses there right now? How is that being rezoned? Meyerhoff is directly across the street from Subaru, actually. There's the parking lot, and then there's a street, and then there's all residential houses.
Meyerhoff's not included.
It's not?
It's not included.
Because maybe that's the way I was looking at the map, no? And then on Berkshire, we'll go to Berkshire now. Berkshire, you have, so you're telling me where the kitchen store is, the animal, the hospital, whatever, they will be allowed to put a second story on that, or would be allowed, right? Is that what the
Yes.
zoning is then?
I don't know which building it is, but one of them already has a second story on it.
Yes.
I don't know if it's on the corner or one to the north.
What's on the corner? The kitchen store? The kitchen store.
Yes.
And also currently has a 35-foot height limitation right now today in the B3 zone. So that's the height limitation.
And then what was the other? What did they have? What was Argyle? Where were they, what's Argyle? Scott's.
Argyle is, the properties in question generally front on Kinderkamack Road. There are the properties that are on the corner of Kinderkamack and Argyle.
Right. There's the beauty
There's the
salon?
There's three, isn't that a mixed-use building with, there's a beauty salon and something else, and then there's
There's a beauty salon, there's a dart store, that's one building, and the other building is the acupuncture.
There's nothing upstairs.
There's no part, then they have a 35-foot height limitation today.
So
that
they're okay, so they are the way they are. In other words, that's not changing,
No, they could put a second story
put a
for
second story
residential,
on that.
correct.
That's
That's
with-
the difference. So if you can envision where the kitchen store is and it has that second story,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying carries across. If a property owner wanted to mimic what was already there, they could match that.
Okay, so the people who own those buildings at the moment?
Correct.
Or if they sold them and whatever?
Correct.
Okay, and are we talking about it all, the Hubcap Joe's property, which has been purchased, but no one's done anything with yet?
That, I believe that is coupled within the,
Isn't that the new liquor store?
well, it's the one that was approved,
Right.
but they haven't
It was
done anything
approved.
with it yet.
Right, it was approved.
All right, but
Right.
he hasn't put in for any,
No.
no, okay. And in answer to the person with the traffic, and I can tell you exactly what happened down in that area. I'm on Beverly Road, it'll be 45 years. That used to be a single lane, and many, many years ago, and I sat at those meetings and said exactly what did happen. When they went, it's stupid, and they speed like you cannot believe. From New Milford Ave, once you hit New Milford Ave, it goes into 2 lanes, and then once you pass the liquor store now, it goes back into 1 lane. And I won't tell you how many times either kids crossing, or for that matter, these kids now with their mufflers that, yeah, they got to gun them up. And all they do, because I've been in acupuncture and I'm sitting there and I could see it all happening a lot of times waiting in the waiting room. They will pass. It's just ridiculous. And many years ago, all the residents down in there at that time fought against that happening, and it happened. And that's the problem with making that turn, which she said, from, coming out of McKay to make a left, forget it. That's, And my kids used to walk to school, and they had to cross that Kinderkamack. So that is a problem down there as far as congestion goes. It's just not an area. The traffic is awful. And Argyle Street itself, I don't even bother trying to make a left-hand turn coming out. I'm down there long enough. I actually make a right, go up, and go all the way around just to get to where I'm going, because you'll sit there and die, So I know I was just throwing that in, but if she's not down here or hasn't been around that long, that's the reason why. That used to be a single from New Milford Ave, and you see where then they went into 2, and then it's stupid, because as soon as you get to the liquor store, you got to go back into 1 lane. It's dumb. But anyway, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to be heard on 26-4? Seeing none, is there any member of the council who wishes to discuss this ordinance further?
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance 26-4 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Will we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Ordinance 26-5 is ready for final reading.
Will the Borough Clerk read ordinance number 26-5 by title only?
An ordinance of the Borough of Oradell amending the borough's code, specifically Chapter 240-6.2, Article 6, zones designated, boundaries established.
Has ordinance number 26-5 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the general public?
Yes.
Mr. Serrania, may we have an explanatory statement, please?
Our deadline to file our plan in 2025 was June 30th. On June 10th, we got a letter from the owner of, or the contract purchaser of 800 Kinderkamak, and wanted us to consider including the site in our plan. We had a deadline, and we said, listen, we don't have time to review your request now, but we will review it, but we want to see that whole northern end of Kinderkamak developed in a comprehensive way. We didn't want it to be piecemeal. And so we filed our plan, and we had objections from 800 Kinderkamak, by THG, I think the principal is Hakimian, and by 690 and 700, and I believe the contract purchaser is Avalon. They both submitted, very voluminous objections to our plan, and the town hired Fran Reiner to develop a vision for that part, and our vision, I thought it was really a very thoughtful vision, but we had to deal with the hand that was dealt to us, and so our position was, we'll develop this area, 690, 700, 800, uniform standards, and we said, we'll allow it to be developed at a density of 28 units per acre, but we really wanted mixed use. We said, if you give us some non-residential, we'll make it 30 units an acre, and we set forth the standards that Fran can speak to in more detail than me to try to manage the risk, understanding that while we were proposing 28 to 30 units per acre, Avalon openly, I'm not talking about just in the context of mediation, was proposing 59 units an acre, okay? So this is all about managing risk. And we tried to come up with something that we thought that the adjudicator would find to be acceptable. And in fact, the adjudicator recommended it, said, this town did what I asked them to do and recommended approval of it. And then there's a crazy nuance in the decision. On one hand, the recommendation of the program judge was to recommend dismissal of the objections of 690, 700, and 800. But then when you look for the reasons for the decision in a separate document, the judge said, but you have to enter into an agreement with either THG or 690, 700. So in any event, the origin of this ordinance is, as I explained, and maybe Fran can elaborate a little bit more on.
Yeah, so as Jeff mentioned, we had two objectors, one for 800 and one for 690 and 700. As Jeff indicated, the Avalon came in and made it public that they were seeking 59 units an acre. The borough had asked me to look at the three properties to determine what I thought would be reasonable. And so what we did was we looked at the underlying zoning and the bulk standards of the underlying zoning. So we looked at what the amount of building coverage could be permitted on the underlying zoning, B2, which was 40%. We looked at what lot coverage could be put on the underlying zoning, which was 75%. And we looked at the building height that was permitted in the underlying zoning, which was 35 feet, 3 stories. So we developed a plan based around the underlying zoning bulk standards, including the setbacks, front, side, and rear. And we were able to determine that based on the underlying zoning, that you could reasonably develop about 24 units an acre on the site, assuming residential as a use, since we were dealing with this affordable housing issue. We went to the adjudicator who was working with the judge, the program judge. Program judge made it clear multiple times during calls that they were going to rely on the advice of the adjudicator. We presented the plan to the adjudicator as a 3-story building, 24 units an acre, with all the setbacks and all the other bulk standards. And through the mediation process, the adjudicator made it clear that that was not enough. They had indicated that at minimum 28 units would be acceptable, and that at minimum 4 stories would be acceptable and reasonable. The 4th story being that Kinderkamak Road is significantly higher than the parking areas of the buildings below. In essence, effectuated a 3-story building, how you visually looked at it. We also increased the building coverage slightly from 40 to 45%, and the lot coverage from 75 to 80%. In doing so, we got the adjudicator to side with us in terms of the density, which was 28 units an acre. Part of the goal was to not simply make these purely 100% residential, since there are tenants in the buildings and there are people that work and live in close proximity. So the adjudicator had indicated that if we wanted to put anything other than residential, that we should look to provide some sort of bonus to the developer, which is why we went from 28 to 30. And as Jeff indicated, the adjudicator had sided with us going from a requested 6-story building, and for one developer, 59 units proposed by the developer, down to a 4-story, 28 unit per acre, with a potential bonus of 2 additional units per acre for 30 if commercial retail were provided. So that's kind of the background information on it.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Jeff. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance 26-5? Seeing none, is there any member of the council who wishes to discuss this ordinance further?
Yes, I probably should have said it initially, and it's echoing everyone else's feeling up here, I think, which is I'm not at all happy having to vote in favor of these ordinances, but I do so to protect us against a worse outcome. It's a predicament, and it's not a problem to solve. It's a predicament with an outcome, and you can only try and affect how you get to the outcome. So with that, I'm done with my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your thoughts. Anyone else from the council wish to discuss this further? Seeing
I'd
none.
like to make a motion that ordinance 26-5 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gullo?
Yes.
Ms. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Ordinance 26-6 is ready for final reading.
Will the Borough Clerk read ordinance number 26-6 by title only, please?
An ordinance to amend sections 240-6.5M and 240-6.50 of the Borough Code to revise the required affordable set-aside.
Has ordinance number 26-6 been published in full, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to the members of the general public?
Yes.
Can we have an explanatory statement, Jeff, please?
Sure. Over the course of mediation, we went into mediation where some of these overlay sites from round 3 had 15% if they were rental, 20% if they were sale. And the adjudicator's position was it has to all be 20%. And so that's how we ended up with this ordinance. We're basically trying to address the concerns of the adjudicator because the judge was crystal clear that he would be relying heavily on the recommendations of the adjudicator. And so that's why we made, we introduced, why we're proposing in the amendment to the plan to have the flat 20% as opposed to 15% if it's rental, 20% if it's for sale.
Thank you. Is there any member of the general public who wishes to be heard concerning this ordinance 26-6? Seeing none, is there any member of the council who wishes to discuss this ordinance further?
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance 26-6 be passed on final reading and published in the Bergen Record on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026.
Do we have a second?
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Sarah?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is the adoption of resolutions 26-79, 26-80, 26-81, 26-82, and 26-83. Would any member of the council wish to pull a resolution for separate vote and/or discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve said resolutions.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gallo?
Yes.
Ms. Sarah?
Yes.
Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
So before I adjourn, I just want to very, very briefly summarize. We all up here appreciate everybody coming out to share your thoughts and your views. You've been heard. We need to hear from you. We wanted to hear from you. There are some things that we are not able to act on. There are some things that we hope to be able to act on. This isn't fun for any of us sitting up here as much as it may disgust some of you. But I do believe, and I'm very fortunate for our council members, past and current, that have really put the borough's position in the greatest possible decision to ward against egregious development that we would be subject to had we not worked through this mediation program with the courts. While we don't have an ideal outcome in every situation, the global outcome is that the borough will maintain its immunity for another cycle, which is a 10-year round. And while we still have some work to do, this has been as much of an emotional process for you all. It's been an exhausting process for us up here as well. And I appreciate people being here to the end of tonight's meeting. It's almost 11:30. Our meetings don't usually go this long, so it should convey to you the importance of needing to hear from you as much as us needing to provide answers to the extent we can to you. So I want to thank the mayor and council for their steadfast focus and their intent on making sure that we do the best within our power to preserve the character and our quality of life here in the borough. And I want to give a huge thanks to our professionals, Fran, Jeff, and Caroline, and Bill, and Dave, to the extent that you will be involved in site plan reviews and so forth. You really have a top-notch team up here who has the best interests of the borough in mind, and that doesn't stop today. We will continue to be preserving those things to the best of our ability. So thank you very much, everybody. If nobody else has anything to add at this late hour, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody.
So